Chosen links. Chosen links by Boaz.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today on Chosen Links. This is a very special and exciting episode we're doing. It's the first one where we're not going to be talking about anything that should give anybody any stress or anxiety or negative vibes, or at least not for the usual reasons. We are not going to be discussing and getting into any hard topics about Judaism. We're going to be talking about stuff that sort of correlates to Judaism and to all religions and to all of humanity and to ethics and morality and just human decency. And what's that? The idea of helping save a life. And I don't just mean emotionally, which certainly is valid. I mean actually, physically taking an organ out of one's body and putting it into another body and having it be a functional organ, which seems like science fiction to most people if you actually think about it. And this is something that all of you in your own ways have been directly involved with or advocates of, or combinations of both. So I thank all of you for being here. And I know all of you either in the past or thanks to this, and I really appreciate you being here. So what I'm going to do as we start and have this fun conversation is first, I'm going to make sure to introduce all of you so I don't have to interrupt during it to give an introduction. So Jeopardy style, let's go ahead and start by introducing you. And we're going to start with, it's alphabetized, so there's no preferential treatment here. We're going to start with Jay Feinberg. So Jay Feinberg, who is the center Hollywood Square in my screen at least. Jay is a 29-year blood cancer survivor and unrelated bone marrow transplant recipient. His journey began in 1991 when he received his transplant in Seattle, Washington. Jay serves as CEO of the Gift of Life Marrow Registry and the Gift of Life Center for Cell and Gene Therapy. He's also president of Gift of Life Biologics, a subsidiary that collaborates with biopharmaceutical firms and research institutions developing next-generation cell and gene therapies. He believes deeply about paying it forward, honoring the gift of a second chance at life he received from his heroic bone marrow donor, Becky. So yes, Jay is not just an advocate, he is also somebody who has lived through this. Jay serves on the Bone Marrow Transplant Advisory Panel for the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration and is a member of BioFlorida, the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, and the American Society of Gene and Cell Therapy. Jay will serve as president-elect of the World Marrow Donor Association for 2024 and president of the International Organization in 2025-2026. Jay is passionate about innovation that will change the paradigm. He has bold, audacious vision of making cellular therapy equal opportunity, high availability, timely and uniform for every patient in need, and a world-class expert experience for every donor. And clearly, he is an underachiever in life. We can all agree to that. Thank you for being here today, Jay, truly.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Truly mine as well. All right, alphabetically on the list, we next have my buddy, Mike Gabler. Gabler, who generally goes by his last name, Gabler. He is a heart valve specialist, an endovascular pioneer with 20 plus years of professional experience. Gabler, as Jeff Probst called him on the CBS show Survivor, recently won and chose to donate his entire $1 million prize to veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and to combat the alarming rate of veteran suicides. While he has never had the honor of serving in the military, it was his honor to serve those who served us and help pay it forward, sensing a theme here between you and Jay already. Gabler and his wife Joanna have been married for over 26 years and are the proud parents of 2 amazing daughters. And let me just say, there have been 46, about to be 47 seasons already of Survivor. He is the only winner to ever donate all of his money. I don't know that we could ever assume that'll happen again. He's a tremendous, tremendous human being. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Boaz. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Next up, we have the lovely Bonnie Lilien. Bonnie Lilien is 73 and lives in Toronto with her husband, David, who we will likely see a cameo from tonight. They've been married for almost 5 decades and have 2 daughters who have blessed them with 2 beautiful grandchildren. Her working life was spent as a high school French teacher. So was my mother's for 50 years, by the way. Bonnie was diagnosed with CKD, that's chronic kidney disease, about 10 years ago. She was on in-home PD for 3 years, but was told that her antibody profile made a transplant match highly unlikely, a 2 in 1,000 chance. Miraculously, she beat those odds when a donor match was found in Los Angeles, some 3,000 miles away. Early in 2023, the transplant was done, and her new kidney has performed wonderfully. She will be eternally grateful to Rabbi Dr. Jason Weiner for his altruistic life-saving donation. And if only we could meet this man. Oh, wait, we can. Very, very, very lovely to see you, Bonnie and Jason, when we get to you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Amazing indeed. Next up, we have Dr. Nicholas Nissen, who goes by Nick. So Dr. Nick is a liver transplant. And here's the word I'm going to mess up, hepatopancreatobiliary surgeon at Cedars Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where I and all of my kids were born. Dr. Nissen trained at the University of Minnesota for both undergrad and med school, followed by residency and fellowship at Loyola University in Chicago and University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. He completed an abdominal organ transplant fellowship at UCLA in 2001 and subsequently joined the Cedars Sinai faculty, where he practices to this day. I graduated from UCLA in 2001. We were together. In 2015, he took over as surgical director of liver transplantation and led the program at Cedars to become one of the fastest growing and most successful liver transplant programs in the country. Under his leadership, the program expanded their use of donor organ salvage, utilizing organs for transplant that would otherwise be discarded, including methods such as donation after cardiac death, machine perfusion of organs, and using organs harboring hepatitis C or other infections. Wow. The Cedars Sinai program also pioneered the use of liver transplantation to treat non-traditional conditions such as acute alcoholic liver disease and certain cancers. In addition to liver transplantation, Dr. Nissen heads the hepatopancreatobiliary surgery program, where he has built one of the largest robotic surgery programs in the country, aimed at lessening the invasiveness of curative surgery for these otherwise devastating cancers. And holy cow, is that an accomplishment. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Nick. And thank you, by the way, to Jason Weiner, who helped introduce me to you. Next up to grabs, we have somebody who I will admit many of my friends, especially ones from Sacramento and Boston, were very excited about. And that is none other than Scot Pollard. Scot Pollard grew up in Utah and Southern California. He played 11 years in the NBA for 5 teams, including Sacramento and Boston, where he won an NBA championship in 2008. Since retiring from the NBA, Scot has appeared in movies and played on a TV show called Survivor, sensing another theme here. Scot is a proud father of 4. His wife, Dawn, had a bout with breast cancer in 2019. Scot was her caregiver through that surgery and through that recovery. In 2024, after 3 years of heart failure, Scot had a heart transplant which saved his life and has turned his philanthropic focus towards encouraging more people to sign up, become donors. And I think you've achieved that goal by literally being here today, amongst other things. Scot, it is exciting to see you as both a Survivor fan and NBA fan, and just as a human fan. And by the way, just as a side note on this, I told Scot, because I knew he would be unfamiliar with my current episodes, I didn't want him to be shocked when he came on and saw, like, what's happening at this show? Is this a medical show? All the other episodes are about Zionism. The next thing he does is show me a shirt that he has that he's worn, and it literally says Zionist and then Hebrew things underneath. I'm like, of all the random things in the world, we got an NBA player who has a shirt that is proud Zionism. So I'm like, wow, sometimes God works in funny ways.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and I keep waking up. That's the most important thing.
Oh, amen to that. Next, we have a very wonderful person important to our family named Dr. Laurel Schramm. Laurel Schramm grew up in San Diego and attended Duke University and UCLA Medical School. In 2004, she started her own pediatric private practice in the Beverly Hills area. In addition to her full-time medical practice, she and her husband, Alec, a physicist, have 4 children aged 14 to 26. Laurel has also performed in the Jewish Women's Repertory Theater musical productions of Fiddler on the Roof and Something Rotten, She decided to become an organ donor as a teenager and was determined to do it while she was still alive. And yes, she did it. She recently, let me just tell you, she is our son and daughter's own personal pediatrician. And when we and other members of her practice who are patients found out that she was on vacation, and we said to her practice, "Oh, do you know when she's back from her vacation?" One of them said, "Vacation? She's recovering from donating her liver to an anonymous person." That is our beautiful and amazing, fantastic pediatrician. Thanks for being here, Laurel. I have to switch back and forth between calling her Dr. Schramm and Laurel, depending on the context.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Rabbi Jason Weiner, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for many, many years. Rabbi Dr. Jason Weiner serves as the senior rabbi and executive director of the spiritual care department at Cedars Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where he's responsible for the chaplaincy team and all aspects of all spiritual care throughout the health system. He has earned 2 rabbinic ordinations, as well as a doctorate in clinical bioethics, a master's degree in bioethics and health policy, and a master's degree in Jewish history. Rabbi Weiner is a member of the executive committee of the Cedars Sinai Bioethics Committee. He frequently serves as a scholar in residence at conferences and synagogues throughout the nation on topics related to Jewish medical ethics, pastoral care, health, and wellness. And he didn't even mention in his own bio that, yes, he also donated his organ, his kidney, to an anonymous donor who is definitely not anonymous anymore, and that's our lovely Bonnie. Thank you for being here today, my friend.
Thank you, Boaz.
On a personal note, let me tell you that I've not only known him for many years before he even worked there in Cedars, but he is personally responsible of helping guide me and Laurel Schramm as our doctor through some pretty challenging and tough times when our kids were born prematurely. So amazing, amazing man who's been there for us. And last but not least, a very close personal friend, somebody who's usually teasing me more than being serious here, so it's going to take all of his self-control not to make fun of me during this, and that is Abraham Zilkha. Abe here is a partner at Ares Management in Los Angeles, a leading alternative asset management firm with over $400 billion in assets under management. Originally from Montreal, Canada, he completed his undergrad studies at McGill University, then received his MBA from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. He is married to Feinberg Zilkha, he is a father of 4. He is a 2-time peripheral stem cell donor via the Gift of Life, the same Gift of Life that Jay is here representing, after having joined the Gift of Life bone marrow database during a Birthright Israel trip. In 2019, he had the opportunity to meet his stem cell recipient face-to-face through the Gift of Life and has built a lifelong friendship with that man. Unbelievable. I am so happy to be able to have people that I knew before and don't knew before. And I have to tell you what brought me to this today, and before we get to you, is the idea that once I found out that Laurel, that our pediatrician, had donated, I was like, enough's enough. We need to tell people about this. I knew that Jason, the whole Jewish community knows about Rabbi Weiner, because when a rabbi in the community donates to an anonymous person, he gets the front page of the Jewish Journal, which he did. All right. And the whole community knew about that and unbelievably grateful. And I've known about Abe for years, even though he barely talks about it. But, you know, you try to make dinner plans with somebody and find out they can't because they're flying to the East Coast to donate. You hear about these things. And when I realized that a third person that I knew had donated anonymously something else, and when I realized that there's so much I don't know about this, and I'm in the medical field, which is why I'm playing make-believe today and wearing my nursing scrubs, it's why I decided if there are things that I need to learn about this, then there's certainly things that people outside of the medical field need to learn about this. So today's goal is to have fun, to talk, to get to know each other, to learn the ins and outs about what it's been like to need organs, to receive organs, to be on that purgatory period of waiting for organs, and everything in between. I'd like us to have some fun talking about what it feels like afterwards in recovery on both sides. And I'd really like us to help not even manipulate, but just let people decide for themselves and see how beautiful of an experience this can be. And I can tell you that just from advertising this from the poster, I had multiple people who came out of the woodwork to tell me that they'd received organs or donated organs, and every one of them couldn't be more grateful. In fact, one of them specifically said that Dr. Nissen saved his life. So how cool is that? So let's get started. Thank you all for being here, every single one of you. Thank you, truly. Okay, now let's get started with a very, very straightforward and obvious question, which is why? Why did all of you get into organ donation, as whether it was a need you had or whether it was something you realized you could do? What made you emotionally and spiritually decide this was something that happened? What started off your journey? Let's go just in order of what we have, and let's try to limit it to shorter answers so we can get to a lot of questions today. But Bonnie, let's start with you. What brought you into this scene?
I needed a kidney. I could not survive without one. My kidney was deteriorating. I think my GFR, that's galvanic filtration.
Don't worry. Even most doctors can't say what that is. Go on.
It was down to about 10, and I would not have survived much longer on dialysis. Although I was a good dialysis patient, and they held me up to other people who were on dialysis. And I spoke to them, and I tried. I find the biggest problem with dialysis is people don't understand it, and they don't realize that that is saving your life. And there are people who refuse it, and unfortunately, that's a method of dealing with kidney disease, and they just waste away. But I wasn't going to. I prayed for a miracle, and I really got my miracle, my hero rabbi. And I just want to show you, if you can see this.
There it is.
This is the magazine that Jason appeared on. And really, he looks like a movie star. And he really is my hero rabbi.
Yeah, he's actually Ryan Gosling's stunt double. Not everybody knows that, but he's whispered it in my ear. Well, it's amazing and unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. I'm so excited I get to meet you. And trust me, I read that article when it came out. The whole community did. And it was great that you came out of the woodwork for it, because you have the right to be anonymous. And it's wonderful that you're not, because you're going to help save other people's lives by talking about it. And even just talking about dialysis is important to talk about, because as I'm sure we can get back to later, we're not going to. I know as a nurse, dialysis is not a fun experience, right? It's not enjoyable.
No.
But it's necessary, and it helps get you to the next step, which you got to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I couldn't have
Fantastic.
walked that step without Rabbi Weiner. It was just.
Oh yes, and he's a godsend.
It's Beshert, and he really is my Beshert.
Wonderful. We won't let his wife watch this, but everyone else can.
No.
No. Don't contradict the host. All right, so moving on. We've got, on my right, Brady Bunch style, we have Mike Gabler. So Gabler, please tell us what inspired you about the field that you're in and why you're here today.
First of all, I'm very proud to be here among all of these amazing people, and my hat's off to you. My heart's full just listening to you right now. I'm here because a life of service is a life well lived, and I chose my career based on that. That's the reason we donated the money at the end of Survivor, is to pay it forward. And with that money, we've helped hundreds of veterans, first responders, and their families. To be that light in the darkness, to show compassion, to help people, is what God put us here for. And there is a reward that comes with that, and it's not in the next life; it's in this life, because by us donating that money, we've gotten $10 million plus back of goodwill, and just getting one letter back from a family that we helped is really powerful. So I think that and we've become friends over the last few months or so, Boaz. You reached out, and this was, I've not donated anything myself as far as an organ. I am an organ donor. I've also witnessed friends. In fact, there was a tragedy that turned into a triumph. There was a good friend of mine whose son had a tragic accident, young man, about 20 years old. And that void that was filled, that void left by a loved one like that is unfathomable. But the young man was an organ donor, and they were able to quickly put some of his organs to use in other people. And those people are doing well, and they're connected with the family. And it has really helped fill that void with love and hope, So that's why I'm here.
Well, I appreciate it. And there's stuff you left out that we'll get back to later, but you do work in the medical field, and it might not be specifically donation, but it is actually related to stuff. But we'll come back to that.
Yes, sir.
Moving around the grid. Next, I have my friend Abraham Zilkha, who is talking to us from, I believe, another country. But Abe, go ahead and chime in and tell us where are you today and why are you?
No, I'm here in LA.
Oh, you are?
That's
Yeah,
LA
okay.
back there. Yeah.
Okay. So why are you here today? What brought you into all of this?
Well, like you said, I joined the bone marrow database on a Birthright Israel trip. Jay's organization, which is a wonderful organization, had a partnership, and I think still has a partnership with Birthright, where when students get on a trip, it's really a great opportunity to tell them about Gift of Life and all the work that the organization does and what bone marrow or stem cell transplants, involve. And it's a great time to solicit people to join the database. They do the cheek swab thing and say, do you want to be in the database? And you might be a match for someone. So I said, sure. I mean, pretty much everyone says sure when you ask them. I don't know, too many people, at least on the trip, didn't say no. And then that was kind of it for, years. And then whatever it was, something like 8 years later, I get a call from one of Jay's colleagues of saying, look, it looks like you're a match for someone. The cheek swab doesn't totally confirm that you're a match. The next phase would be a blood test to see if you're a compatible donor. You want to go take a blood test? I'm sure. And then I ended up being a match, and they said, okay, do you want to go through the process of donating either marrow or stem cells to perhaps save this person's life? And you don't know much about the person other than that they're sick and roughly their age. And so I said yes. And it's an interesting experience, in part because I don't know how many people actually get a phone call saying, like, do you want to come possibly save someone's life, right? Like, I have an incredible admiration for Rabbi Weiner and others or Dr. Schramm, who's kind of said, look, I'm going to go out of my way and no one's asking me, I'm going to go do this, which is incredible. But I'm trying to think I don't think it's quite as incredible to just get a call and say, hey, do you want to try to save someone's life? I mean, what are you going to say? No? I mean, I'm sure some people do say no, but it's really an opportunity to help someone that's served to you on a silver platter. And it's been an incredibly meaningful experience for me. I donated twice to the same person, a few years apart, because it didn't really for lack of medical terminology, didn't really take the first time, and had to do it again. And then I got the chance to meet him. Mike might appreciate this. He was a retired Marine. So, it was really nice to be able to help someone who had served the country as well. And he was just such a great guy. And, the whole thing came full circle. So I'm here to share that story, and also just to tell people what it's like to be a stem cell donor. It's nowhere near as invasive as what, a living liver or kidney donor go through. And it really is something that I encourage people to sign up for. I've done multiple cheek swab drives at my office or at our synagogue to just kind of get people in the database and answer their questions. And for a not very taxing experience, you can really save someone's life, and it's worth people knowing about.
And Abe, let me just point out, though, you're saying as if like, oh, you got a phone call, it fell into your lap, and whereas, Jason and Laurel, they went for it. It wouldn't have happened unless you'd gone out of your way to initially get that swab, which most people don't do. And Jay can speak to that, certainly. So what we need is more people like you who take that initial, very easy initiative to let themselves be a match. They might never be a match, but you don't get that phone call if you don't initially get that swab. So thank you and bravo for you to do that initial swab. Now, Jay, tell us your story, because it certainly is more than just like you were on LinkedIn and got a job at Gift of Life. So
Absolutely. First, I just wanted to let Abe know that we're celebrating the 500th transplant thanks to Birthright participants like yourself. So thank you so much for what you've done. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. So my story is probably pretty similar, like some others here. I was diagnosed with blood cancer, leukemia, and told that my only hope of a cure was a bone marrow transplant. I didn't have a family member who was a match, and at the time, this goes back to the early 90s. The registries were really just starting to form back then, and they were very small. And most important, and this wasn't something that I knew until I went to Sloan Kettering in New York. I was in New Jersey at the time, and I was told that the likelihood of my finding a match was like looking for a needle in a haystack because I was Jewish. And I didn't know that tissue type is inherited like eye or hair color. So your best chance of finding a genetic match is with someone with a similar background. And Jews were not well represented in the donor pool, in part due to the Holocaust that severed bloodlines. So that's really how my journey started, running donor drives. And you ask what motivated me to get involved besides being in need of a transplant. It was the very first donor drive that we did in northern New Jersey. We were just starting out. It was at a synagogue across the street from our home. And when we got there, we didn't know what to expect, but the line was out the door, down the sidewalk, into the street, and the police were there doing crowd control. All of this for someone that these people didn't know, and they were there to help save a life. And that's, I think, when I knew that regardless of how things turned out, I wanted to focus my efforts on this.
It's a ridiculously cool story that could honestly be made into a movie, from your potentially dying and being told that there was very little hope, to finding somebody, to getting you to actually now save countless, and I mean countless, lives. I mean, the only count you have so far is just from the birthright trips alone, 500. That's a count, but what about all the non-birthright matches you've done? It's astounding. So bravo to you, hugely.
And something else that's amazing from that story is how the community came out once they were alerted to the need, how there were so many people, good people, coming forward to help out. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do today. And bravo, that is an amazing story. It would be a great movie.
Yeah,
Thank you. As it turns out, the documentary is coming out next year on PBS nationwide. So
get out of here. That's amazing. Okay. Make sure none of us miss that, please. You let us know. We're all going to be watching that.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, we're obviously this is not, everybody's going to be talking more than once. This is our initial why we're here. So moving along from that, let's talk to Scot Pollard, who's a little bit less well lit than us, but we can still certainly see the very tall man before us.
Sorry, I'm in Indiana. I guess it's dark out here already, and there's nothing much I can do about it. It's usually cloudy. I'm just happy it's been sunny lately. It's not Southern California out here, I'll tell you that much. And being on the Eastern time zone, I've been here for 23 years. I'm still not used to it.
Why are you with us today, though, other than trying to get our sunshine?
I'm here in the dark because I'm not here to upset the medical community, but I've had 2 flu shots in my life, and the first one I got violently ill and I got traded. Actually, I got cut from the Atlanta Hawks in 1999. So I never got a flu shot again until 3 years ago, when I was told you should probably get one of them COVID shots. And I was like, I'm not sure about that. And they said, well, you should get a flu shot just to be sure it'll help. And I had just had my annual heart exam, which I always have because I have heart issues in my family, and came back great, 100% normal. Everything's good for me in January of 2021. And I got the flu shot in late February of 2021. And shortly after that, I got a virus that attacked my heart and gave me PVCs. My heart was beating about 10,000 extra beats a day. And I immediately was in heart failure. I couldn't walk across the room. And 3 years of drugs, 3 years of ablations. I had 3 ablations at the University of Chicago Hospital. I have a team here in Indiana at St. Vincent's Hospital. They're incredible. I have a team at University of Chicago Hospital. They're incredible. And both of those teams suggested after September of last year, it's not going away. The ablations aren't working. This is something that virus released a genetic issue. We can't fix it. So we need to start looking at transplant. And that was obviously the last thing I wanted to hear as a 49-year-old man, 48 at the time. But I'd already had a pacemaker and defibrillator put in, and my heart didn't stop, and I didn't need the pacemaker because it wasn't trying to slow it down. It was just trying to make sure it didn't just stop, period. So it was more of a defibrillator that I needed more than a pacemaker. You know, for 3 years, I was out of breath. I couldn't do an interview like this without stopping. Last year at this time, I couldn't talk this long. So I got listed here at St. Vincent's Hospital in early January. I got listed at the University of Chicago Hospital. And before they could give me my what they were going to list me at, I was listed at a status 4 here in Indianapolis. And then I went to University of Chicago, went through all their testing, and then I came home for the weekend, and I was planning on going to Vanderbilt, which both my teams, both here and in Chicago, suggested I go and get listed as many different regions as possible. You guys know that are in the field, you don't get listed 3 hospitals in the same region. There's no need for that. The organs go to the same region. So I got listed here. I got listed in Chicago, which is a different region. And they all suggested I go to Vanderbilt as well to get listed there because they do a ton of transplants in Vanderbilt. Typically the top 1 or 2 in the country of heart transplants in volume. So I was at Vanderbilt day 2. I walked in a wheelchair. Actually, my wife put me in a wheelchair because she was like, "You don't look good." And I didn't want to get out of bed that morning. Day 2 of testing, I walked in. I met Dr. Shaw, the surgeon that ended up being my transplant surgeon. And he said, "Scott, how you feeling?" I said, "I didn't want to get out of bed this morning. I don't want to be here." And he said, "You don't look very good." And then I went to my next appointment. He said, "Nice to meet you," and went through his little spiel and sent me on my way to my next appointment. Next appointment was supposed to be a treadmill test. And the cardiologist came in and said, and I quote, "You look like shit." "You're not leaving. You're not doing the treadmill test. I'm sending you to the ICU, and we're going to keep you until you get a new heart." I was planning on being there for 3 days. I was there for 26 in hospital total, which I was told would never happen that fast. I'm 7 feet tall, which is why everybody was saying, get listed here, get listed there, get listed there, because the chances of finding a heart big enough for me was slim to none. For people that don't know, technology's changed quite a bit because in 1991, my dad died on the transplant list because back then your donor had to be your size. So immediately when they said to me, "You're needing a transplant," I thought, well, I'm going to fucking die because that's what I need. I need a heart from a giant. Luckily, technology's better. I needed a heart from a big man, but I got one. And Vanderbilt, because of their volume, they were able to get me one. My first one was actually a false or a dry run, they call. And I got that one. I was in the hospital February 6th. And actually on Super Bowl Sunday, they said, "When's your birthday?" I said, "Tomorrow." They said, "Well, happy birthday. You're getting a new heart tomorrow." And I got excited. And I watched the Super Bowl and I didn't eat anything. All 4 of my kids came down to Nashville. And Monday I woke up and we waited. And after about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, they said, "It's not going to happen. The heart's not good." So that got, that was a long day. But miraculously, it was just 4 days later that they found the heart. And all I know about my donor is that he's a big man. He was my hero. And I've written my letter and I've sent it through the hospital. And I have not received a response. For those of you that know, obviously, they tell you not to expect a response. It's a tragedy. You know, some people, just their family members, they don't want to deal with it. And I completely understand that. I put that in my letter. I sure wish they would respond, but that's a selfish request for me. I'm not going to tell somebody else how to grieve. But if they ever happen to see anything about me, I just hope that they know that I am eternally grateful for what their loved one did and saved my life. And that's why I've committed the rest of my life, however long it might be, to raising awareness to become a donor. I'm a donor myself. I don't know if there's going to be able to use any of my parts anymore because all the drugs I'm on for life. But anything they can use, they are welcome to it, and I'm happy to help pay it forward.
And your story hits me on every emotion that I can imagine, the positive and the negatives, and it's like, wow, give me the chills. I have so many questions I want to ask you, so don't let me forget to come next to you and talk to you about more, because there's a lot to unpack there. It's fascinating that you would need somebody who's very large for a large, for the same large organ. I wonder if that's true, and I'll ask people on this if that's true of other organs. I would imagine that it's not, for example, with a liver where you can just take portions of it, but that is fascinating, and that's pretty wild that you have a genetic predisposition. I guess your father had went through it, and that it got set off and by a horrible virus, and just Oh, I'm very grateful that we're seeing you on the other end of the positive part of it, and we're not talking to you in between the sort of the two times when you were dealing with a mini tragedy. So thanks for being here, Scott.
Thanks.
Dr. Nick, I would love to hear about you, and I'm curious if you crossed over at all. You must have crossed over at UCLA with me in 2001, and maybe I wonder if you crossed over with Laurel Schramm as well.
I think I remember you. Were you on the plaza around, June 15th, 2001?
No, that was my twin.
So, yeah, I trained at UCLA in 2001, and it's actually really important for my own journey. I was a fully trained abdominal surgeon, kind of trying to figure out where to go, what specialty to move into, and I still remember coming out to interview at UCLA. I came out and interviewed with a guy out there named Ron Busuttil, who was sort of one of the fathers of liver transplant. And you asked about why we sort of got into what we're doing, and some words and some thoughts that characterize our journey. And for me, it's the need and it's the challenge. And the need for liver transplant is pretty obvious when you see people in liver failure. It's a very dramatic condition, jaundice, swelling, and we sometimes have patients with liver failure that have a few days to live. It's a spectrum disease, like a lot of conditions. There's some people that can be on the transplant list and can wait years. There's other people that can be on the transplant list and have literally a few days to live. So the need for liver transplant is incredible, and the transformation that happens from a person in liver failure who's got a few days to live, who then receives a new liver, and then literally a few weeks later goes home. It truly is rebirth. It's rebirth and rejuvenation and regeneration all mixed together. It's one of the most phenomenal things you can see in medicine. So that's the need of it. The challenge of it, again, I encountered when I came to visit UCLA, and I walked into that operating room and saw the team that was assembled, the specialists that were there, anesthesia, surgery, nurses, techs, blood bank, organ specialists, recovery teams. I mean, 25 people working together to get this transplant done. And it was seamless, beautiful, seamless operation. Liver transplant is a highly technical operation. It's one of the more challenging operations that a person could even think of. Certainly, in the abdomen. My wife's a heart transplant surgeon. She often challenges me that above the diaphragm is pretty tough too. But in the abdomen, liver transplant is a tough surgery. And the challenge of taking that on and being part of that journey of rebirth that comes with the patient, the diseases we face are ominous and overwhelming, and we get to be part of this incredible healing process. And there's no better example of the wonder of modern medicine than transplant. As you said, being able to take an organ and put it in someone else and have it function. I mean, that's Brave New World type stuff, and it works. It works with incredible success rates. We sometimes don't remember that the survival rates for these organ transplants, whether it's heart, liver, kidney, they're pushing 95% 1-year survival rates. Incredibly successful these ventures, solid organ transplant. And we've heard some of those stories that it's hard to believe that when transplant, certainly liver transplant, was first sort of put together and understood, the mortality rates were so high that the government put a moratorium on it. They actually stopped centers from doing liver transplant because so many people were dying. And it took, again, some of these forefathers, these heroes of medicine, to figure out how to do it right. And it was, of course, with some of the immunosuppression medication that allowed us to take off in the 80s. And again, the field continues to grow. Minimally invasive surgery, kidney donation now is done with robotic surgery, so the tiny incisions. We've started that program at Cedars here now, and kidney donors, their operation is 2 hours, tiny incisions. They can go home in 1 or 2 days. Even live donor liver transplant now can be done with small incisions through robotic techniques. So the field's continuing to move forward, and it's so exciting that we can change lives and yet keep getting better and better and use all the tools available. Technology, digital services, even AI, I think, is going to be part of medicine as we go forward. Use all that to move the needle, and I'm so glad you put this together, because that's what this is about: moving the needle and saving lives.
I'm definitely going to be getting to questions. I even have questions about AI we're going to get to later. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, this is it. Brave New World is right. It's incredible what you're doing. Out of curiosity, since your wife is a renowned heart surgeon, do you guys ever get into ego battles as to which one is a more challenging field?
We do. Whenever we do, whenever we do, she just holds her hands up. She's got these beautiful long fingers. She says, "Take a look at that. Those are the hands of a surgeon." And she puts it up next to mine, and her hand is bigger than mine, so she wins.
I love the ego of surgeons. It never gets old. Amazing having you here. And it really is. And I love that you worked with Ron Busatil because, boy, you cannot research anything about this field without learning about him. He's like the godfather of it. So it's really cool. And I know he's still around. He's kind of emeritus. I know he doesn't do surgeries anymore, but he's still there working at UCLA. So it's
Phenomenal.
so cool. So thanks for being here. All right. And now we have Rabbi Dr. Jason Weiner. Curious right away, coming from what Dr. Nick said, did you have a robotic one with a tiny little incision like he was saying? What was your circumstance?
No, it was laparoscopic, but not robotic. I didn't even have that option. I would have loved to donate it at Cedars Sinai, my home institution, but I was also very happy to get to go to Toronto and meet Bonnie and explore a new community there.
You met Bonnie right away? Like this wasn't a later process? You met her?
No, I met her in the hospital as I was being discharged, actually.
Wow.
After the surgery. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about your journey. Tell us about your journey here. What put you on the list in the first place?
Well, basically, so I'm a chaplain and I visit patients and I'm here to support them and be there for them. And frequently, being a chaplain here at Cedars Sinai, I get to meet lots of donors and recipients. And I always made sure to go and praise them and just be there with them and tell them how impressed I am by what they did and hear their stories. And I always found it to be so meaningful. I always thought to myself, I'm glad someone's doing it because I wouldn't do that. But at least there's some good people out there making that sacrifice. And then a friend of mine was in desperate need of a kidney and he was having a swabbing event and he invited me. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was even going to go, but I sort of felt like, how can I not go? I mean, I'm always praising other people. And then what do I lack any integrity? Am I so hypocritical that I wouldn't even go to this event? So I went to the event. I found it very inspiring and I swabbed there. And thankfully they found someone else who was a match for him. And I felt relieved, like, okay, he got his life saved and I didn't have to be the one to do it. And then about 2 years later, I got a phone call informing me that it turned out that I was a match for someone who had had a difficult time finding a donor and that I was basically a perfect match for that person. But, I should make my own decision and, think about it and not rush into it. And at first I remember being totally shocked and terrified and like, what did I get myself into? And I would never do this. And then it started to transform into sort of like, wow, but what an opportunity to actually help someone and actually live up to my values. I mean, again, I started thinking like, I praise this and I think it's so special. So why wouldn't I do that? And then I started to actually get excited about it. I went from like being terrified to like, wow, this is really kind of exciting. And then I just started by going to Toronto to be evaluated. And then it turned out that I was fit to do it. And I started hearing great things about Bonnie. And so it made me even more motivated. And the whole process was really a really special, rewarding, and valuable experience.
I love that you were going through the stages of grief, like Dabda, and then except in your case, it didn't finish with acceptance; it finished with joy. I mean, boy, oh boy, that's awesome. Now, out of curiosity, I mean, every one of you are bringing up things that just make me want to interrupt you and ask questions. But one quick sort of detail-oriented question: when you're doing this process for somebody who doesn't have money, are you doing this at your own dime, or are they flying you out?
Yeah, actually, the Canadian government actually pays for it. It goes through their insurance and they cover all expenses. And so I didn't have to spend anything. No.
Okay. And anybody on this chain want to just chime in based on your experience? Is there any reason other than a secondary reason of how it might put you out of commission and therefore you might not work for a few extra days or weeks, but in terms of actual physical, logistical expenses of getting this done, of your recovery, of getting there, of getting back, of lodging while you're there, are there expenses that are involved if you are donating any one of these organs out of curiosity to the whole field of you? No?
I'll go one step further. Not only were there no expenses, in my case, the gift of life. I mean, they did everything. They booked the flights, they booked a hotel, they booked the transportation. You just had to show up and they got you the appointment. I mean, the team was incredible. They find a nurse because you have to take certain injections of a drug before you donate. And they do pretty much everything. They just tell you where to be and you be there.
It's been incredibly expensive for me. I don't live in Nashville. I live in Indiana. I have to drive to Nashville every month for my follow-ups now. I had to live in Nashville for about a month and a half after transplant at my own expense. I was saddled with a lot of debt. I'm not ever probably going to work again, but luckily my wife is able to work and she's doing very well. But it's been incredibly expensive for us. Luckily, I have incredible insurance through the NBA. We're over, I think, about $2 million now for the surgery that the NBA insurance has covered. But as far as travel, I have to go get a hotel every month. I have to drive down there every month. Even if there was direct flights, which there aren't, it would take longer to fly. Then it's only about a 4 hour and 15-minute drive. So I just rather would drive anyway as opposed to fly.
So correct me if I'm wrong from everybody then. So if you are the patient, which in this case on this chat would be Bonnie and Scott, if you're the patient, like with other items of healthcare, you're going to be stuck with the American or Canadian healthcare system that we have with all the bills and all the insurance needs. If you are the donor, you're going to be completely not out of pocket for anything and taken care of. Am I gathering correctly just about from everybody on this chat?
No,
I wanted to say,
I was just going to say everything here in Canada is paid for. It's all our socialized medicine.
Right. So it's consistent with your medicine. So I guess Canada is a less good example. But okay, in America where it's not socialized, am I right? What were you going to say, Laurel? And I want to hear your story.
oh, I was going to say, yeah, everything was covered by the recipient's insurance, they told me. The one thing that was not was my parking at the hospital. So that was kind of fun. So when I went for the tests and when I went for I guess when I had the surgery, my husband drove me, picked me up, so I didn't park. But when I went for the testing, then I had to pay for my own parking. They said you actually can fill out like a parking voucher, and they have a program where it can be reimbursed if you're below a certain income. But I didn't bother doing that. So I did pay for parking.
Okay. So the recipients who are, obviously getting the gift of life from their various organs, though, they could be in debt for the rest of their lives, depending on who they are and their circumstance. But obviously happy to be having the organ, but that's a whole other Zoom chat, is the American health system. I don't think there's anybody in this chat who's necessarily in love with it, including doctors and nurses. But it's good to know, because the people we're really trying to encourage here is, right, obviously we kind of assume that the people who need the transplants are already all in, right? They're sold, they're hoping to get it. The people that what we're really hoping for is to inspire, not manipulate, but inspire people to sign up to be donors. And for those people, it sounds like, other than potentially paying for parking, it's pretty much covered. And that's a huge relief. Because obviously for those of us who are not the recipients, that is a factor, obviously. So that's good to know. So Laurel, please tell us about yourself.
In answer to the question of how did I come to this point, I can't remember a time when I didn't know about organ donation. I figure I learned about it as a child or a teenager. When you get your driver's license, they talk about it. So, I learned from very young that we have 2 kidneys and you only need one. So I was like, okay, well, great. I don't need one. So I'll give one to somebody who needs it. So I always figured that I would do that. I've just been blessed with good health. And, I always figured, well, certainly if someday, a friend or a family member needs it, I would definitely, go ahead and donate a kidney. That was my thought. And then I started thinking, well, there's all these people who need kidneys. And at that point I was thinking kidney, who need kidneys, who don't have friends or family members who are a good match for them. And, what about them? It just doesn't seem right. They have friends, they have family, but they don't have someone to donate to them. And so I said, well, that's the same thing. Just because it's somebody, I'm not their family, I'm not their friend, doesn't mean I can't, help them in that way. I would want somebody to do the same for me or to my family member. if no, there was nobody that was a good match in our family. So I decided, oh, okay, well, so then I just kind of had that mindset. But I did figure, just being in the medical profession, I know, I plan to have several children, and I know things sometimes can happen during pregnancies. So I thought, let me wait till I have my kids, and then I'll do it. So I had kind of that time frame in mind. And then a week after I had my fourth child, I had a kidney stone. And then I said, oh no. And my main thought was never mind, it was painful, but my next thought, it passed in a day. People suffer for much longer. But my main thought was, oh no, now they're not going to want me as a kidney donor. And so I thought, okay, I better just wait a few years
and lie about ever having a kidney stone.
And so I let like 10 years pass, and then I was like, okay, I think my kidneys are fine. I continue to be in good health. Let's go ahead and go for this. So I started reaching out, and I started the process of trying to become a kidney donor. And unfortunately, at the end of that, it turned out I had like 32 tubes of blood drawn. I had the whole, all EKG and CT and everything. And then it turned out I had a tiny kidney stone in each kidney, one in each kidney. So then I couldn't be so they called and they told me that, and I started crying. It was something that I kind of always imagined myself doing, as a way of helping people. I think of myself as, a giving person, and that was just really important to me. So then they said, well, we have a liver transplant, liver donor program also. And I went, well, that sounds like kind of a bigger deal, but, thought about it, said, on the phone, I'm thinking, okay, why don't you send me information about it? And I thought, and it's like, it's the same principle. It's really the same principle. You can take part of the liver regrows, and I'm still helping someone, and, it's just a different way than I imagined, but let me move forward with this. And I went through that whole process, and they said, yes, you're in good health, you can do it. And I just kept going and did that. So,
and unlike Jason, where he had it laparoscopically, not robotically, but laparoscopically, correct me if I'm wrong, yours had to be a proper open incision, right?
Right. Yeah. Just regular surgery. Yep.
Okay. And you are happier for it seems.
It went well. I have no idea about the recipient, but these things are usually very successful, as Dr. Nissen said. So I feel great, and I'm very happy about it.
Well, bravo to all of you, every single one of you. I have so many follow-up questions to ask you. The first person I'm going to go back to, though, is Jay, because unlike most of you, I was able to very luckily grab Jay at all, but I only have Jay for a portion of the time. So Jay, what I would really like to know from you, and honestly from everybody who is an expert in their particular organ in the field, but starting with you, give me a pitch and explain to me what are the requirements needed for me to sign up? Because I can tell you from personal experience that years ago, back when I was in college at UCLA, I signed up and I got my cheek swabbed, and I did it for the bone marrow. For bone marrow is probably the Be the Match at the time. Yeah, it was Be the Match, right? Which you guys, and they changed their names, and you guys work with them. And then they told me a while later, when I actually looked through all my medical conditions, and they were like, oh, well, your medical condition with your immunoglobulin deficiency might fall under this. So maybe actually, and ultimately, long story short, I'm like, what's the tachlis? What's the final word on this? And they were like, and the answer was like, yeah, you're not going to be eligible. And that was very disappointing for me to find out that I wasn't eligible for something that they couldn't even tell like where it fit between the cracks. So what did I do? I kind of did what Abe did over there, and I made drives. I went to nursing school and I just created drives, and I got the rest of my class matched up so I could do something. And it's why I'm doing this today, so that I can do something. But everybody has their own medical condition. Everybody's a different age. Everybody's got their own health background and their health conditions. How does somebody know what they can be eligible for? I'm going to want to know this for kidneys, for livers, for potential when they've died for a heart. In your case, though, your specialty is bone marrow and stem cells, correct?
Yes.
Give me the lowdown.
So, as you know, the first step is just doing that initial cheek swab to get you tissue typed and go into the registry. And you may also remember, certainly Abe remembers, at that time, it was a very short health history questionnaire. just a preliminary screening to determine if you were at least preliminarily eligible to be in the registry. The much more complicated, lengthy health history screening questionnaires followed by, physical exam and blood work and everything comes later if you're a potential match for a patient. People shouldn't say that maybe they have something that might disqualify them, so they shouldn't do it. They should at least try. We might screen you out based on that initial screening, or we might screen you out later. But it's sort of like the lottery. You got to be in it to win it. So it's very, very important that people at least make that initial effort to see if they can join the registry. As far as what we look for, we look for, in a nutshell, there's a lot of, potential conditions that might disqualify you. But, what we look for in a sense is anything that might pose a risk to you as a donor, and anything that might pose a risk to the potential recipient. So, things like a history of malignant cancer, from a communicable disease from the donor perspective, giving that to the recipient, and then from the donor safety perspective, which obviously donor safety is paramount to us. Could be something like a heart condition, for example. So those are the kinds of things that we look for when we're recruiting donors and go through that process.
Can I ask briefly? I know that over the years there have been controversial things with the Red Cross and so on, where over periods of time, I remember they would disqualify somebody for even donating blood if they've ever been sexually active with homosexual lifestyle. And I think things like this have changed over time.
Yes.
Thankfully. In the case of gift of life and with bone marrow and stem cells, are there any entire sweeping categories of people who would not be eligible and should not be encouraged to join? People even just if you're a cigarette smoker or if you've ever been a smoker, does that disqualify you? Are there any sweeping big things like that other than malignant cancers and stuff?
No, there really aren't. And what you mentioned before is thankfully not an issue anymore, thanks to changes in the FDA guidelines. Prior to that, it was a challenge because we have to comply with FDA regulations on donor eligibility. But thankfully, that's changed, and we're very happy about that.
Oh, I bet you are. Okay, so that's wonderful. So basically, what it comes down to is just get your cheek swabbed, send it in. It probably won't be relevant, and if it ever is, then you'll figure it out afterwards. And it doesn't really cost you any time or effort or money to get this swab, right?
Right, exactly. We let us worry about the fundraising. We're good at it, thankfully, and as a result, over 5,000 people have had transplants through gift of life. So
incredible.
Yep. So it's very, very important that if people are interested, they should go ahead and do it.
So while we were sitting here, I just signed up for a cheek swab kit to be sent to my house. It was pretty easy. It took about 90 seconds.
All right.
That's pretty cool. I have a friend who's going to need a bone marrow transplant, and she's having trouble, finding the right person. And I said, can I somehow get screened? And she said, I don't even know how you do that. The chance of you being, she said, it's nice, but the chance of you being compatible is, I don't know, one in how many million. But yeah. if I do the cheek swab thing, I'll go into a registry then. As long as they search her type again, it'll capture me, right?
Yeah. So actually, all the registries collaborate globally through the World Marrow Donor Association. That's the organization that I'll be the president of next year. And there's a global database, so the transplant centers can do a real-time search of all 43 million donors in seconds, and identify which donors are located in which countries, and go ahead and order those donors for what we call confirmatory typing and then workup. And what you said is very important, about going ahead and going online and doing that swab. Back with my story, it was a 4-year search for a donor, and literally the very last person that we tested at the very last drive that we did, which was at a yeshiva in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was my match. And she went to hand out flyers. At the time, it wasn't a cheek swab, it was a blood test. And she was afraid of needles, so she wasn't planning to get tested. But at the very end, she asked the phlebotomist if she would unpack her supplies and go ahead and draw her blood. And she was the last one. and she was my match. So it only takes one person to save a life, and it could be anyone.
Incredible. Is there an age limit that somebody can sign up and do this?
You have to be 18, and it's through your 61st birthday. However, I will tell you that about approximately 90% of the donors who are called by transplant centers are donors between the ages of 18 and 35.
And why is that?
Transplant physicians tend to prefer younger donors. They're healthier, obviously, but also the younger you are, the more what we see is that the stem cell yield from the collections is higher. So we can give a bigger dose to the transplant centers for the patients.
Now, can you explain to me, and the reason I'm focusing so much on you is, and you for everyone else's sake, is because I want to make sure I catch him before he goes. Now, can you explain to me what is the difference between you're doing stem cells and bone marrow? Well, what's the difference? Give me the distinction between what somebody would be donating and why.
Yep. So historically, if we go back many years, the gold standard was a bone marrow donation, which required going into the hospital, undergoing anesthesia, and having a needle and syringe withdraw marrow from the posterior aspect of the pelvic bone. That was the gold standard for a very, very long time, until the mid 90s. When we started to collect donors through a procedure called peripheral blood stem cell donation. And Abe knows that well because he described it earlier, the procedures that he went through. The stem cells are found in the blood progenitor cells, or the stem cells are found in the hollow cavities of the body's large bones, in the bone marrow. But we can kind of coax the stem cells out of the bone marrow to proliferate from the bone marrow into the bloodstream by giving a synthetic version of a growth factor called filgrastim, marketed under the trade name Neupogen, to donors to increase the production of those cells so that they flow out into the bloodstream and can be collected through apheresis procedure, where a needle is put in each arm. The blood is taken out of one arm, run through a very large centrifuge. We spin out the stem cells, take those, and put the rest of the blood back in the other arm. There are, aside from the donation procedure, peripheral blood stem cell being easier on the donor than a bone marrow harvest, there are pros and cons to the procedures for the patients. So for children, for pediatric patients, bone marrow is preferred. For adult patients, peripheral blood stem cells are preferred. And that largely has to do with a condition called graft versus host disease, which is just as it sounds, the donor's cells fighting the host, or the organs in the recipient. So there's a less of that occurs with a bone marrow transplant, which is why we prefer it for children.
And that's why recipients are constantly, two of them over here, are constantly taking drugs such as Prograf, right, to help prevent things such as that.
Yes.
And Boaz, I actually I have the picture of me in the midst of the procedure, just in case anyone wants to see kind of what it actually, how uninvasive it looks. I can share that if you want.
I would love you to share it. I just gave you the capability if you'd like to. And Abe, Jay just gave us an extremely good answer as to what's happening. I'd like you to tell us, for most people watching, I'm a nurse and I completely understood what he was talking about with apheresis and so on, because I've helped people with that. I want to know, for most people watching, and there you are as a patient, I want you to tell me, what does it feel like for a typical person who is not medical? They don't understand medical jargon. They just want to know, how did it feel? They're scared of being in your shoes. How much did it hurt? How long was the recovery? How long were you out of commission? What did it feel like? Can you please tell us that?
Yeah, I think when people hear bone marrow, they tend to think of the procedure that Jay described that is not common, where they're going into your spine and retracting stuff. And I don't know what that feels like because I didn't do that, but Jay can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's only like 10% of cases now, right? Like that's not a big number, right? In my case, you're sitting there, you kind of see me sitting there in a little hospital bed. There's a machine that I guess kind of sort of looks like a dialysis machine that is running a tube through one of your arms. and your blood is coming out. They're collecting, for lack of better terms, the cells that they need, and then the blood is returning through your other arm. And so you're kind of sitting there, and yeah, you're there for a few hours. It's not that long. It's uncomfortable at times because you have to keep your arm very, very still, but it's like, to use the word painful would be a stretch, right? Like it's just not particularly comfy. But that is only a few hours, and here I am doing it again. This was the second time, like I don't look particularly unpleasant here in terms of just discomfort. And then it's done. You're kind of like a little stiff after, and they want you to like hang out nearby the hospital for like the next night, just in case anything goes wrong. But it's not painful. It's not taxing. There's no, at least in my case, and I think the majority of the cases, no long-term physical consequence of it. It really is just taking the time to do it, right? Like it's not hard to do once you sign up.
You can go back to work the next day or two. Like it's
No,
not.
I took a couple of days off. I was like, I maybe worked from home or something, and you have to bake in the travel. I had to travel to New Jersey to do it, but it's if you're near a collection center or where the patient needs you to be, then maybe you could go back the next day. I think you budget a day off on either end of the experience probably. But yeah, look, and then I know this isn't the picture you asked for, but since we're doing pictures, I mean, this is why you do it, right? This is the gentleman I got to meet, and he's a super nice guy, and he's got a big family, and it was just to be able to kind of be at an event and meet him and just connect the dots on everything. We did exchange anonymous letters originally, and then that turned into like a real meeting, and we did an interview with the news network in his hometown. I mean, it's wild, right? I mean, it's just, think about it this way. If you may be, to anyone out there who's not in the database, you may be sitting on the cure for someone's disease, and it may be in you and you have no idea. And if you don't make a point of figuring that out, people could die because you just didn't take the time to figure it out. Right. And like, I'm not saying everyone's got to do it. Everyone's got to make their own choice, but you could be the one person in the world that could match for them. And
yeah,
why not see if that's the case, right? Like
somebody's laziness can inadvertently be preventing something pretty life-altering. And by the way, I appreciate this picture because it shows me from the ribbons you were first place and he was second place. So thank you for the best in show picture.
Well, no, it was the donors were blue and the recipients were orange. There was a bunch of us. But, it's not laziness, though. I'll be honest. Maybe for some people, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what the procedure involves. Like when I told someone I was a match, they're like, oh, it's going to hurt so much. Like, you're really going to do this? It takes years off your life. And I'm like, what are you talking about, right? Like, there's just, I think a lot of perhaps misguided or misdated information about what the procedure actually entails. It's not painful. It had absolutely no long-term side effects for me. And I was this guy's match. And, and you, like I said, you could be sitting on the cure for someone's disease. I think the right thing to do, if you can, is to make sure that you give the opportunity for that person to find out.
I mean, it's beautiful. It's unbelievable, really. Now, Jay, why does he have to fly to New Jersey? Can't somebody say, hey, I'm a match? That's awesome. I've got kids to feed over here. I get that you're going to pay for me, but I can't leave town. Just draw my blood here, take the stem cells here, and take it across the country there. Why do I have to go out of my way?
Yeah. So it used to be the case that you could donate in more centers that were closer to where donors were located. If you were in a metropolitan area, there was a collection center for you. The challenge that we've had in recent years is that more and more of these hospitals and the centers that are standalone centers, like the one that we have in our headquarters in South Florida, are unable to meet the demands of the transplant centers in terms of the dates that the transplant patients need. So even if there is a center that might be near you, if they can't meet those dates, and what we find is that 60% of the time, those centers cannot meet the dates, then we ask the donors to fly because if a transplant center says, look, we need this transplant to take place on this date, or in this range, and we're given a date 3 or 4 weeks later, that patient may not be around anymore. So about 60% of the donors fly, and it's not because we want them to have to fly. It's simply because it's the only way to meet the timeframes that the transplant centers are looking for their patients.
Oh, okay. It just is a need. It's the way it happens. You try to make it as accommodating as possible for the people, but at the end of the day, sometimes it just has to be that you go to them, and that's the way you're going to save their life.
Yeah, it's become such a challenge to secure those dates, that with the growing number of transplants that are taking place here in the United States and abroad, and all of the cell therapies that are emerging, and the need for allogeneic donors, unrelated donors for these treatments now that are emerging, most of those donors that I just mentioned end up coming to our center in Florida, which is high capacity and dedicated solely to unrelated donor collections.
I'm fairly certain that you have to get going. I'm going to ask you one. I was trying to pour through key things that I have. Lots of people sent a lot of questions for all of you. I was trying to see if there was anything specifically for you, and I did have one that's semi for you, so I will just throw that out there before you have to go. Ariel Jalali, who actually is an expert in AI and has asked some pretty cool, good, geeky questions here. But he did ask a question related to stem cells, which you may or may not be able to answer. How many organs do any of you know? It might be that somebody else knows that, or you. How many organs can be grown via stem cells in the lab versus harvested from donors today, which he believes is about 10%. So where do we see that percentage in the next 5 to 20 years going, and what innovations have to be unlocked along the way? Do any of you have any sort of ballpark idea about stem cells and where we're going with them? Because that's certainly sometimes a hot topic, unfortunately, even politically, but we're talking medically right now.
Well, I may defer to some of the experts here, but I can tell you that in our work with Gift of Life Biologics, which is a division of the organization, we work with biopharmaceutical firms to provide starting material for further manufacture into treatments like CAR T cells and such. So that's kind of where we see the direction going, particularly for patients out there who can't find a donor for a transplant. But the other thing that you just mentioned about growing these organs, I think I'll defer to some of the experts here.
Yeah, fair enough. And it might be that nobody here is necessarily true, but yeah, certainly Dr. Nissen might know, might have an idea, and so on, and Gabler might, because he works with heart valves. So yeah, thank you very much. Stay as long as you want to stay as long as you can, but I know you have to go, so I appreciate you letting me focus on you in the beginning. And I know that Abe kind of is tethered to you. The Gift of Life people are going to go, and then we're going to focus on the other organs. So thank you both, honestly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's been a real honor to be in the company of all of you. You're truly extraordinary.
And what's the I know that it must be easy because Dr. Nick did it, but go ahead and tell us, how do we sign up?
So very easy. Just go to the website, giftoflife.org, and you'll see it right there on the homepage. And you just fill out the online form, and we'll go ahead and we'll send you your kit.
And it's free, a free kit.
Yep.
Thank you, honestly. Thank you both.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Boaz. Thanks, everyone.
My pleasure. Before we continue with a totally different question, out of curiosity, I would imagine Dr. Nick or Gabler here would be the two people that would be most adept at answering. Do either of you guys have any answer to the question about the future of stem cells with harvesting organs or anything like that, or is that completely out of your purviews?
It's out of my purviews, but Dr. Nick, that sounds like your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, we're a long way away from that. Organs are when you talk about solid organs, they're so complex. There's so many cell types that interact in ways that we're just beginning to understand. So I love the idea of it, of populating a matrix with stem cells, but we're a long way away from that. I mean, there's some really organ recovery things that are more on the horizon than growing organs are. It's great to think about because maybe it has applications in other fields of medicine, cancer therapy and other things. But in terms of meeting our organ need, that's not going to be the solution anytime in the next few years. We've got a lot of other options, but not that one.
Do any of you happen to know, and I mean, Scott might be the one who might know this the most because he's the only one here who's directly worked with heart transplants as a recipient. Somebody asked specifically saying that they'd heard many times in their life that there were brain cells in the heart that actually store memory. I mean, that sounds like science fiction to me. Is there truth to that, or do we have absolutely no idea? Because I'm not asking any experts on hearts here.
Yeah, obviously, I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor, but I've never heard of that. But when you are a transplant recipient, your vagus nerve, VAGUS, not the fun city, that's like your information superhighway. And so now my new heart is not connected to my central nervous system. And therefore it doesn't talk to my brain. It didn't know when I'm standing up. It didn't know when I'm walking. It doesn't know when I'm using my muscles. And it's come a long way, but there's times where I'll go up a few stairs and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, and I gotta wait because my heart doesn't know that I was gonna do that, where it would if it was connected originally.
Interesting.
So that is a thing. I'm not saying that it's connected to or that it has brain cells in it, but my new heart is not my heart. And so therefore it's still learning, and from what I've been told, it can connect and start to kind of develop some awareness. And it seems as though mine new one has, because it's gotten a lot better. A few weeks after transplant, when I stood up, I damn near passed out every time. And now I don't even think about it. I just get up and go. So it's gotten
so your neural network, which I might be using a terrible terminology, but it basically becomes smarter and more used to each other, and it becomes more and more connected over time.
I'm not saying that, I don't know, but I just know that this heart has now gotten better at reacting to changes in needs for blood pressure, whereas originally it was not. It didn't know when I was standing up, and now it seems as though when I stand up, I don't get lightheaded. I used to, but now I don't. But there's still times where I exert myself a little bit too much if I'm lifting something, or I carry something a short distance. I don't carry heavy stuff anymore, but little things. There's times where I'm like, it just didn't know that I was going to do that, and I just used a lot of energy, and my heart didn't know it was going to do that, so it needs time. And then I'll sit down, and all of a sudden it's going. And it takes a while to calm down because, again, it doesn't know if I'm going to keep doing that stuff. So that's been something that is something to get used to. But as far as I've heard, I'm on a transplant group on Facebook. As far as I've heard, I'm doing very well, because there's some people that apparently their hearts don't talk to them, and they've been transplant recipients for years.
Wow. This is fascinating. This is why we're doing it. I'm in healthcare, and I can't say that I am completely ignorant to this. I wonder how much of this the other medical professionals on here, Laurel and Nick, even are familiar with, because it's obviously heart transplants are not their field. You know what it reminded me of, what you were saying, and then I want to hear from them about it. But the way you described it, however much is accurate, that, or supposition, as you say, from just living it, kind of reminded me of medically what's happening through multiple sclerosis patients, except kind of the inverse of that. So people who have MS, they have their myelin sheath, and you kind of degrade this area that essentially is normally an involuntary, just instantaneous response. Every time you're moving, it tells you what to do, and goes through your spinal cord, and you move instantly. And people with MS, it starts to slow down, giving a very basic, very basic, semi-ignorant answer. It slows down, sort of one thing telling the next thing isn't as instantaneous, and you have that sort of delay while people are getting worse with multiple sclerosis. It sounds like with you, it almost starts off like there's almost there's that link that's not quite there and learning it. But unlike with MS, it sounds like if you're fortunate, it gets stronger and stronger, and it gets faster and faster and connects you better and better. So it's very, very interesting. Like your neural highway becomes less clogged, so to speak.
It seems as that's the case for me, and I'm happy to report that, because it has gotten a lot better.
That's really, really cool. Nick and Laurel, do you have anything? I mean, you don't have to say no, because I know it's not your fields, but do you have anything that you can extrapolate on what he's saying before I go to another question?
No, I'm searching it on the internet while you're talking. And as you said, Scott, this concept of reinnervation can occur. They're describing here that if you look hard enough, you can find it in quite a few people late far down the road that the nerves can regrow into the heart. It's actually a really fascinating concept because, you know, the kidney's totally denervated. The liver's denervated. They're all these organs, of course, have no attachments other than the sewing of blood vessels and the sewing of ureters and other things when you implant them. So they're all completely foreign to the new body, and the new body not only has to adapt, and we're trying to prevent rejection with all of our medications, but you know, it's like an uninvited guest, right? I mean, they're in your house now, and you got to learn to live with them. And they do some things that bug you, and you get a little annoyed now and then and there's a give and take. And again, Scott, what you're describing is hard to imagine with your profession, that having to limit your activity because you couldn't count on this thing to do its job. And thank goodness over time it figures it out. The liver doesn't need a lot of nerve function. The liver can figure it out just as blood flows through it and bile flows out of it. And the kidney's pretty smart too. It's just a glorified filter. That's not totally true, but that's how we think of it sometimes. But
wow. We really take our bodies for granted, don't we? How
we
much
do. They're
subconsciously.
so incredible. They're so incredible, our bodies.
You don't appreciate it fully until it goes wrong, and then you suddenly realize what you're missing. I mean, we all go through it our own ways, right? Your pinky toe is irrelevant to your body till you break your pinky toe, and then you realize it's helping you clasp things, and it's just like all these things that we just don't appreciate.
But
and
can I mention one other thing? Remember, for the donors, for the live donors, you know, the blood pool will repopulate. The marrow repopulates, as far as I know. Kidney doesn't. You only have one kidney. If you give a kidney, you're left with just one. But the liver can regenerate. The liver, if you take part of a liver, the remaining liver will grow back to near the normal size of the original liver. So
I'm glad you said that, because I learned that from Laurel. So I would like you to tell me, how much of your liver can you remove and still have it fully regenerate?
So you can take as much as 70%. That's pretty rare to do that. You know, a good kind of rule of thumb would be 50%. There's a lot of formulas that go into it, making sure you leave enough. You have to leave enough that the donor recovers fully. And there's some formulas we use based on the volume of liver they have divided by their body weight. So somewhere around 1% of your body weight you need to leave behind. But you can, you know, remember the donor can be quite a bit bigger than the recipient. So you can take a large piece out of and give it to a small recipient. There's all kinds of mathematics that goes into this, but you can safely take, generally in a healthy person, greater than 50% of their liver. And that remnant piece will grow back. It doesn't quite regenerate the way people think. You don't regrow the left half of your liver like a lizard's tail. What happens is the piece that's left behind enlarges. It sort of hypertrophies. It grows back to the size that's needed to restore your body function. I sometimes get asked, can I donate more than once? Because if you said it regenerates, you just keep taking it out like Prometheus on top of the mountain, and grows back every night. That mythical story. You can't, because when you do the donation, you take the blood vessels with that side of the liver, that piece of liver, and as it regrows, you don't regrow those major blood vessels. So you really can't donate your liver more than once, even though I'm sure, Laurel probably would do that if she could, but you can't. So.
Wait, but if somebody took out, let's just say we asked Laurel what percentage she took out, which I will, and let's just say she says she took out 30%. Couldn't she, in theory, still donate again and just make sure she takes out no more than another 30-40%, and that would still be within the range? I'm just doing simple arithmetic here.
No.
I'm being a smartass. Okay.
No. Related to the blood vessels, because you have to take that piece of liver and go reattach it. It has to have perfect, and I mean, it's such a complicated field. Live donor liver transplant and kidney transplant, such a complicated field. You have to have perfect blood flow in, perfect blood flow out, and perfect connections with the biliary tree. And you just, it's an incredibly complex surgery, and it's got to be perfect.
Wow. And Laurel, how much did you have removed?
Yeah, I don't know the exact percentage, but what happens is that when you are donating anonymously, then they just ask you, when would you like to donate? Because there's not a specific person you're donating to. And so you say, oh, well, this time will work in my schedule. And so that's what I did. And the reason that's relevant is that you say, okay, this is the date, which in my case, I picked like May 23rd, this past May. And then they said, okay, so as we get, that was at that point like a month away or 6 weeks or something. And so then they evaluated various people and they said, if at that time we have a child who is the highest one on the list, then we will take the left half of your liver, which is smaller. And if it's an adult who is the one that's highest on the list, then we'll take the right half of your liver, which is bigger. And so it just turned out when I went in, it was an adult. And so they took the right half, which is bigger. So I guess it's a little bit more than 50% that they took.
As a pediatrician, I'm sorry that it ended up being an adult. That's very confusing.
That's okay.
That's so interesting.
Can I this is so remarkable to meet you, Laurel. I mean, this altruistic donation is more common with kidney than with liver, because the liver operation's bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, for you to go to another city, not even knowing which half of the liver they're going to take out.
I didn't have to go to another city. It was here in LA because
you're in LA. But yeah. I mean, it's just phenomenal. Having an open operation to remove part of your liver in a non-directed way, in an altruistic way, I think is heartwarming, and for me it's moving. And I'm in the field, and I just find it outstanding and wonderful.
I think just being in the field of medicine, you see how things can happen, how things can go wrong so quickly. Things happen to people. I'm like, I could be in a car accident any day, and then I would die, and then maybe everything would be crushed, and then I just felt like, while I'm able, I want to be able to do this, because people are dying every day on the transplant list, and I'm sure they have people that love them so much, and yet they're not a match. And, is that really?
So Laurel is implying that working in healthcare, it seems obvious to be on the list because you see people who need it all the time. How can you not? And it regenerates. So Nick, you're in the field. How many Laurel Schramms are there in the world that are doctors working in their private practices, helping other patients that say, and here's my organ, because obviously.
Probably can count them on two hands, probably. I mean, it's unbelievable.
That's what I thought. So,
now, can I just say something else about since they took the right side? This was funny. They took the right side of the liver, which is the bigger side. It also comes with the gallbladder. So I said, that's interesting. You took the liver out, and then do you transplant the gallbladder? Like, do you reattach that? They said, no, we just throw it away. I was like, oh, all right, there goes the gallbladder.
Out goes the baby with the bathwater. Wow, that's fascinating. Now, livers. Let's livers while we're on it, and then I want to know about kidneys. Livers what's the age requirement there? We heard from Jay before about bone marrow and stem cells. What's the age requirement for livers?
Generally, for live donor, 21 through maybe 60s, pushing it. A lot of programs 55 is the upper limit, but in that ballpark. So your liver, the ability of the liver to regenerate does slow down. You can have a very, very healthy liver in your late 50s and 60s, and we'll take a whole organ and transplant that. We've even used 80-year-old donors where we'll take their, a deceased donor. So the liver, older livers can work absolutely phenomenally, but they don't regenerate quite as well. So when you're taking pieces of livers, there is some concern about age. And so again, 55, 60 is kind of where a lot of programs will say, we're not really going to put you at risk as a donor. We're not going to put the donor at risk any further. Because remember, the liver needs to regenerate. It needs to recover. There is some risk to the donor operation. And not only the operation needs to go smoothly, but your liver then does need to regenerate and recover. And so you have to make sure there's no underlying liver disease, and that the liver will recover and regenerate. And again, age does factor into that. So
how often or rare, we're not just trying to sell people on this, but obviously like anything else medical, you tell them the risks, which is what you're saying now. So what are the chances of risk that somebody signs up, gets accepted, because that's the only relevant part, and saying, hey, you're a match, we would like you to donate part of your liver. How likely is it that person now goes through the process and then it fails to regenerate properly? They now have chronic issues.
Oh, it's very uncommon. I mean, it's very, very uncommon. It's so well known in centers that do liver transplant, live donor liver transplant. There's a tremendous concern over donor safety, and so I think we protect donors at all costs. So the chance of you having a non-regenerating donor, in other words, a donor-related complication related to non-regeneration, is very, very small, because programs are always going to build in a margin of safety. Some programs do liver biopsies ahead of time and other things. So it's very, very safe. And this concept of not regenerating, again, there's a margin built in so that it's not going to happen. These operations all have risks, but liver failure is extremely rare for the donor, extremely rare.
Well, and part of the reason for that, it sounds like, is because you're screening out the people that are the most likely candidates. And even they, I'm sure, for the most part, would be fine, but you're just getting rid of anybody who has the highest percentage. So essentially, if it comes down to it and the place is willing to take it, that means that they're saying it's safe for you to do it. Okay.
Yes.
So now I'm a little bit confused, though. Laurel, you were able to just basically say, oh, I'll donate anytime that works with my schedule, which is very different from like what Jay was telling us about, like, when you have to be ready to come and why you have to fly here.
Right.
Does that mean that that anybody who wants to donate is always a match for somebody, and at any given point they can just donate tomorrow?
With livers, it's blood type. It's not HLA. So it's just simple blood type. So that's what some people, when they heard about when I did it, said, well, how did you know you were a match for somebody? And I'm like, well, everybody's going to be a match for somebody because, blood type is very common.
So if you are a universal donor blood type, which is that O positive, am I remembering correctly? If you're
universal donor is O negative, but yeah.
O negative. Thank you. So if you're a universal donor with your blood type, you are, assuming you're not rejected for some underlying condition, you can donate your liver if you're in the right age.
But they are going to match the blood type. I mean, Dr. Nissen can speak to this, but even people who are AB negative, which is the rarest blood type, there's still going to be millions of people that are AB negative, So yeah, I'm A positive. That's very common. I just said, yeah, I'm willing to donate. And once they found I was healthy, they found somebody else who was A positive. So it's just very common. So it's
when we looked for reviews of you on the internet and we saw your A positive, we thought it was based on user reviews, but I didn't know it was with the blood type. I'm gonna have to look for a new pediatrician.
If I may, Boaz, I'm O positive, which is the most common, and it's also the most difficult to get a heart because there's so many people that are O positive that there's a lot of need for people to get an O positive heart. So if you're O positive, donate.
Yeah, absolutely. So question for you, Scott. In your story, as obviously we're going to remember, 4 days before the miracle of it happening was a tease of it happening, which became probably some of your darkest days of your life till it happened again. Why did that fall through? What were you told of the reason?
So we've kind of touched on these subjects as we've talked tonight, but you can sign up for high-risk donors. I signed up for everybody at the request or the suggestion of all three of my teams because of my limited ability to get a heart big enough for me. They said, you can do what you want, but we recommend that you sign up for any heart you can possibly get, which included experimental, which they've done now, but at the time I don't know that they had a box that they created very recently that kept the heart alive and pumps fluid through it while it's being transported and keeps it pumping. So I signed up for that. I signed up for high-risk heart, which can include anybody from an ER physician or nurse, because you're constantly dealing with infections and all those kind of things, to somebody that might be in prison or have a high-risk behavior lifestyle, whether it's intravenous drug use, et cetera, et cetera. And so I signed up for all of them. As it turned out, my first heart, the dry run, was a high-risk heart. That's all I know. But also, I signed up for something called a DNC heart. And a DNC thing, not everybody does these. I'm sure Cedars does. I know Vanderbilt does. A lot of people say they do them, but I spoke with some teams and they said, yes, we do them. And I said, have you done them? And they said, no. But we would. So a DNC, it's where they're not technically a donor. And so the body has been catastrophically injured. They are being kept alive by a machine. And in that situation, I think if I'm getting it right, they unplug and let the body expire. And when the body expires, they reanimate and then they harvest for donation. That person must expire within a certain time limit. And I believe it's 2 hours. My first donor that was on my birthday did not expire within the time limit. And that's why we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And then they finally said the person did not expire. I'm using that as a story to say that wasn't the right person for me. It's possible that the high risk heart could have had other issues as well. So I'm just saying that was good. It was a good thing for me that it wasn't the right heart. And actually there was another one the same day, but it was very quickly. Like they just said, don't eat yet. We might have another one. And they called like 15 minutes later and they said that one's not going to work either. And so I technically had 2 dry runs on the first day, or not the first day, but on my birthday.
Is there a way as a donor that you can make sure that if you are DNC, that you can, or DNR, that you will not have to wait and go through that cycle? Is there a way to do that?
I believe if you're a donor, then you're not in that. Like they'll pull the plug. Like they won't keep you alive. They can just harvest the organs if you're a donor. I think the DNC is for people that don't have a next of kin. They're on life support. No one can give the permission, and they have not given permission by becoming a donor. So if you are already a donor, if I understand it correctly, they won't do that. They won't pull the plug and let you expire. They'll just harvest the organs because you're already a donor.
I got to jump in because I want to make sure we're saying the right thing. So are you saying DCD, DNC,
That's
DCD?
it.
So DCD stands for donation after cardiac death, and you described it actually really, really well. But it doesn't have anything to do with whether you're a donor or not. And Mike, you can't specify because what it has to do with is this concept we haven't talked about at all called brain death. Brain death means that you have no brain function and you are legally dead. You are legally dead, but because you're on a breathing machine and your heart still functions, you still have heart function and lung function as long as you're on the breathing machine. But you've passed. That's where most donors come from. They're then taken to the operating room. Their organs are recovered, and that's where we get the vast majority of organs. But in the last few years, to try to capture all we can to take advantage of every opportunity. And because a lot of families wanted to donate, but their person wasn't brain dead, their loved one wasn't brain dead, but they weren't going to recover. As you said, they had a devastating injury and everybody knows where this is headed, but they're not actually brain dead. They don't fit the legal definition of death. And you can't take their organs until they've passed. That's the law. So they're brought to the operating room. They're allowed to expire. That's the DCD part. So they're allowed to expire, meaning the heart stops, and they're declared by an independent team. This is very, very rigorous. It's very, very well worked out. It's very well thought out. There's a lot of discussion about this in the transplant community. They're declared dead by an independent team, and only then, after a certain break, there's actually a period, a staying period where you can't touch them, then you can proceed with organ recovery. But think about that, how incredible that is. Their heart stopped, and now after sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 7 minutes, depending on the country, actually, the recovery team comes and can recover the organs. And yes, you then use these organs in a person waiting at home. And there's a lot of debate about how to do that and the right way to do that, but you hit on the machine perfusion. I'm taking the organ out and putting it on a special machine to rejuvenate it, to preserve it while you then bring it to Vanderbilt or while you bring it to Indiana, wherever you're going to bring it. That's one of the incredible advancements we've had in the field of transplantation. And that DCD, machine perfusion, using these organs that would normally be discarded, that is a real advance in transplantation, and it's game-changing, absolutely game-changing across the country, certainly in the world of, well, actually all organs, liver transplant, heart, lung, everyone's now exploring the DCD, machine perfusion, eliminating the concern about how far we can travel because it's on a pump. You can travel. We can take livers from Hawaii. We can theoretically take livers from Europe if there weren't, laws and things, because once it's on a pump, it can go 12, 18, 24 hours before you have to put it in somebody. So again, we talked about Brave New World. This is incredible stuff. It's really, really important, really exciting, and it's going to change the world.
I'm going on caveman knowledge from the experts, and I'm trying to remember what they were telling me about it. So thank you for clarifying. The last thing I want to do is spread information that's not correct. So thank you.
I mean, Scott, you are months away from getting a new heart in your body. I think a brain fart that any one of us would do without a new organ in our body is more than passable, so don't worry about it. So how does somebody go about saying that they want to donate their liver? Do they just, besides being an organ donor on a card, if they want to do it as a living donor, what do they do, Laurel Schramm?
I just called. I just Googled kidney transplant center and picked up the phone.
Liver, you mean?
No, because I called about kidney. Remember, initially. Yeah.
Got it.
And and it was one of the local programs, and it was very well organized. And it just from that first phone call, then they said, okay, great, we'll schedule for this, and let's talk to you, this person. I mean, you have to talk to a psychiatrist to make sure that your mental health is good. And they do all the medical screening. Because I work full time, they really organize things well as far as me actually going there. Put everything together, the blood draw, the EKG, the treadmill, the CT, that, they did everything all together. And then once it changed to liver, then I did a lot of it over again, because actually I did it last fall. And then as a pediatrician, flu season, very, very busy. So once that didn't work out, then I had to kind of wait through the winter flu season before I could go through the evaluation again. So I had to do it all again, and then donate in May. My husband was on sabbatical this semester, and so that's why it was a good time for me, because he would be home to take care of me in my recovery. But yeah, I just picked up the phone. I just Googled and picked up the phone call.
Now, was it the same process for you, Jason, with kidneys? How did you get onto the list? What was your process of that?
Well, my process was there's an organization called Renewal that helps people to find kidneys. That's why, for example, I donated to someone in Canada. Normally, I don't think there would be the same registry for an American to donate to a Canadian. But since I had swabbed through Renewal for that friend of mine, that's an international database, and they were able to then find Bonnie and make that match.
So if somebody right here is watching this and says, writing down, okay, I'm going to sign up for this, I'm going to sign up for this, I'm going to sign up for this and this. So we know that they're going to go over to the Gift of Life, and they're going to get their free kit. Then they would also go to Renewal. These are all different swabs that go to different databases.
Yeah, it's a separate database.
Okay. And then you basically, again, no cost to you. They're just going to send it to you. You send it off, and you just wait. And if anything happens, it happens.
Right. I mean, not only that, but Renewal, in addition to, I mentioned before that the Canadian government covered all of my costs. Renewal covered any additional costs. Like, let's say I needed, just someone to watch my kids while I was away, things like that the Canadian government would not cover. They would cover those additional costs as well. So they're a very helpful organization.
That's amazing. So if I want to have a date night with my wife, I can sign up for this, and they'll cover my date night, is what you're saying.
You'll have to ask them about that. But they also put you in touch. They helped me because I was nervous, I admit, and so they helped me find people to talk to who had donated kidneys and had gone through it before, so that I could talk to them and ask my questions, and that was also very helpful, especially afterwards.
Did you know you were going to get to meet Bonnie at the time when you were flying over there? Was that like a surprise? Here she is.
I hoped that I would, and I didn't know if I would or how that would work. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't like adamant that I had to, especially if she didn't want to. I wouldn't have imposed that.
Okay, so Bonnie, and if David's next to you, David, this could be a good time for you to jump in, because I know her doting husband has been present. Did you know you were going to get to meet Jason? Did you know that a rabbi was coming into Canada to give you your organ? Like, what did you know? What was whispered in your ear?
Initially, there was another rabbi who we were kind of researching, And I think he was in Montreal, but he turned out not to be a match. So we kind of had the idea of Rabbi, and we, kept trying to figure out where he was from or whatever. But one thing we really have to know, that Renewal is primarily for people of Jewish origin. So it's not just anybody who can appeal to them. In my own kidney group here with the Canadian Kidney Foundation, people have said to me, well, what do I have to do to get on Renewal's list? And they really can't. This is us, I guess, looking after our own. And we often don't do that. But here we are, and here we're really helping our own. So,
If I didn't hear the beginning of this conversation, an hour and a half ago about then I would think, oh, that's so odd. Why would we have to have our own? But if you recall, we went back to the beginning and Jay was the one telling us that there really weren't, I think it was Jay, that we absolutely have a dearth of options amongst the Jews, in part because people have so many have died during the Holocaust. So exactly. So it's not just a matter of like, oh, let's make something for our own, but it sounds like we actually needed to.
So also that Renewal won't turn anyone away. If someone does go to Renewal, they don't say like, oh, we will only take you if you're Jewish. They will help anyone, but it is a Jewish community organization. That's true. So that's the primary focus, but they will help anyone.
So if somebody is watching this and they are of any religion, any faith from anywhere, they can sign up right now on Renewal, and they will.
You can contact Renewal, and Renewal will help them. Yeah, definitely.
Is Renewal like the go-to, or is there some other big organization everybody uses as well? That's the one I've heard of.
I think Renewal is the go-to. They're very supportive and very helpful.
All right, well then definitely Jews and non-Jews alike should be signing up there if they're the go-to, because otherwise we're just telling everybody they're shit out of luck. So that's good. Now, do either of you know, and I would imagine, Jason, you're more likely to know as the donor, either of you know the requirements, age, I've asked everybody the age requirements and so on to be a donor?
No, but they told me that I had a young man who was really interested in being a donor, and he would go through. Like some people do change their minds. I don't know if you watched, there's a Simpsons episode where Homer has to be a donor for his father or whatever, and he chickens out. He runs out of the hospital. But so that.
Well, he probably had Dr. Nick as a doctor. I've seen all of that. So I would also chicken out.
Well, that seems to be, that can happen too. But they assured me with Jason that he was in there for the giving, and that he was. So that was certainly a balm to my conscience.
That's beautiful. I can't believe that you were looking into other rabbis that might have donated as well. And for anybody watching who's wondering why I just completely dissed Dr. Nick, that means you're not a Simpsons fan. And FYI, Dr. Nick is a great character on The Simpsons who is a terrible doctor. So no, I was not dissing the doctor here. Jason, do you know the age requirement? Because I'm sure
I can tell you, I'm not a doctor. I can tell you that I have visited kidney donors here in our hospital in their mid-70s.
Wow.
So yeah.
Okay, and these are obviously living donors because you're visiting them. So that's fantastic.
We also had somebody in our kidney group who told us about a man who was 86 who just received a kidney. Wow. And apparently he's doing very, very well.
That's amazing. Now, in the case, here's a really, okay, we're going to start to get to some of, I don't know if I want to say more fun questions, but there's some pretty, when I saw some questions, I was like, we have to get to these. And some of these are going to be ethical type ones, which definitely I'm going to want to hear what Jason has to say as the chaplain and so on. So first things first, here's a logistical one, and then you're going to see the direction we're going into ethics. People have mentioned to me, and I wasn't aware of this, but it makes sense. Is it true that when you donate certain X, Y, or Z, they were talking about stem cells, bone marrow, but I believe could also be true of liver, could also be true of kidney. Is it true that if you have been a successful donor, you've done it, are you now top of the list yourself if you ever need one?
Absolutely.
Yes?
That's
across the board of what we're talking about, Dr. Nick?
Yep, they let you know that you are. Jason, I'm sure you got that same message from them.
I've heard the same.
For liver and pancreas, again, for a donor to need a liver transplant is almost unheard of. Kidney, but donating a kidney, if you do develop high blood pressure or something down the road, it is possible that decades later the one kidney you have left, you need help with that, and absolutely you're given priority. Absolutely. Like it's not the next day, it's not the next week, it's decades later.
And
Okay.
the Kidney Foundation here in Canada has done a study, and they find that people who are kidney donors actually live longer than most people because they've done such a thorough workup on them. They found that there's nothing wrong. They're healthier than most people. So there's longevity for them.
So I understand that you're saying that you're answering a ridiculous question that somebody is not going to ever need a transplant who's donated themselves from a liver, maybe kidney. But I'm still, for the sake, you have to understand. I'm now not asking you a medical question. I'm now asking you the question that most scared people are thinking to themselves, which is one of the fears they have. Sure, there's cost. We've talked about cost. There's no cost to the donors. Sure, there's cost to the recipients like Scott, but to the donors. We know that in terms of pain, we've talked about how much there is with recovery. And we know that in terms of how dangerous it is to you medically, we've talked about the fact that almost everybody who it's a danger to, they basically just don't do the procedures on. But we have to address people's fears. And people's psychology and fears is, if I give something of myself, I am afraid, what if I ever need this? What if a family member needs my kidney later that I have now donated? What if Jason's first cousin he would have been a great match for one day needs to get his own kidney? He cannot donate his second one again. How do we get people past these types of fears? And I will even give you the most heartbreaking question I can give you, okay? A dear, dear friend that Jason likely knows, Lisa, she lost the most horrible, tragic thing that anybody could ever lose. She lost her child, her daughter. Her question, with that in mind, was as follows. How can you persuade someone to donate an organ when they're in the throes of grief and they want their loved one to be buried intact, as they were taught throughout their, let's just say in our case, Jewish education? What can we do to better inform our children's teachers so that these misconceptions are addressed early on? Now, you hear the heartbreak of this. This is somebody who years ago now lost her child, and this topic triggered her where she was still feeling that level of guilt about the idea of, should I have made my child into a donor for somebody else? Should I have let them do the operation on my child to make them into a donor, right? We're obviously not talking about a living donor situation now. So we have to get over these hurdles of terrified people for themselves, for their family members, for family members who might need their organs. And that's what I'm trying to really get us through right now from Jason, from Nick, from all of you, is what happens? How much of a safety net do you have for yourself and your family if you choose to become a donor of, let's talk right now about liver and kidneys?
Can I just say that with when I looked into being a kidney donor, they did say if you're a kidney donor, then yes, you are put in priority if you would ever need a kidney. And not only that, they said you can also pick like 4 family members that would also get a higher priority. So I hadn't heard that before. My immediate family is 6 people though, so I immediately was like, oh no. But then, right, that was, but they didn't say that with liver. So what didn't come up at all. So I never heard that.
Maybe it didn't come up at all because as Dr. Nick says, it just never happens that you need it, so they don't mention it. Well,
but I also think one of the answers to what you just brought up about if somebody has something tragic happen to them, I think the best thing to do is to have conversations like this, to raise awareness. So just as I was aware from when I was very young, and it's something that, was brought up in my family. Oh, would you be a donor? Would you be a donor? Like if something happens to you, you're watching TV, you turn to each other, you're like, oh, let's talk about this, because people don't like to think about these things. But if it's brought up, just over time, then the family talks about it, people know each other's desires. So I think that's.
So Jason, you chimed in and said the exact same thing. You were told the same thing.
I was told that as well, that family members would be put on higher priority. I also think that once you break that taboo of saying like, I'm willing to do this, other people in your family for whom it might have been, not something that they would have ever thought of doing, but once they realize, okay, this is something that I might be able to do as well, like it does open up the potential for more people to consider that. And as to your initial question about the woman who lost a child, there's one thing about the question itself that I didn't like, which is that you said, how do you persuade someone at that moment? My answer would be, we never try to persuade. We never put pressure on anyone. If someone has thought about this at a time, not in a moment of stress and tragedy, and this is something that they would want to do in order to help other people in the midst of their loss, then of course that's a beautiful thing, but would never put any pressure on anyone or persuade them or give them any guilt if they didn't do that at all.
That makes a lot of sense.
I piggyback that thought process, Jason, because I think that, I wasn't a donor before. My wife wasn't a donor before. And we were just thinking it was kind of weird. We didn't have a religious thing where we thought, well, we need to be buried whole. And I'm not talking about, bone marrow or anything. I'm talking about, if you were to pass away, to be able to donate all of your organs and skin, which a lot of people forget about. They forget skin can help people live a better life, and it's your biggest organ. So I just want people to kind of think about that as well. But, we got over it really quick, obviously, because of what happened to me. But every time we talk to somebody about it, like, well, what's the problem? Well, I didn't really thought about it, but yeah, I don't need them anymore. So it's almost like it just needs to be a dialogue, to your point, not in the moment, but in a casual, like we've all been kind of saying, in a casual sense, having that conversation with people, or family members or whatever, like, well, I'm a donor. Why? Well, because I'm not going to need them anymore. And when you make it that simple, I don't know anybody. I've never talked to anybody in the last 6 months that this has become like the focus of my life that has said, well, it's still weird. Every single person is like, God, I'm signing up. Like, why wouldn't I? When you make it that simple. So I think that it is something that I think more people just need to talk about it with their friends and family.
Right, and that's part of why, I initially did not want to share publicly what I was doing. I thought, like, I'm doing it because it's a mitzvah, because it's a religious commandment, and it makes it more special and, real if I'm not doing it to get credit or any kind of praise. I want to just do it quietly, meet Bonnie and then go home and just not talk about it. But my rabbis convinced me that, like, if I would share it, hopefully that could help other people realize that they could do it as well. And there's like, it pays itself forward in that way. And so there's that value in kind of, once you've done it, other people are willing to do it as well. And there's more and more lives get saved.
Creating this kind of awareness in this conversation is really what's important. The person I was talking about earlier, whose son tragically was taken by an accident, he was a perfusionist by trade. So he and his family had these discussions ahead of time. And, therefore, in the moment, it was a foregone conclusion. They knew they were going to donate his organs and give the gift of life to other folks, which again helped them heal and helped other people. And it was not in the spur of the moment. And I think that the Rabbi, you did a wonderful job, very eloquently stating how delicate that is and how sensitive the folks on the teams are. And this is something that shouldn't be on the spot. This should be something that is thought about, and by having this call put together, Boaz and everybody on it, that's going to help people think about things that are caught up in the inertia of life and get busy and can think about being an organ donor and making those decisions ahead of time so that they're not forced on the moment.
A thought occurred to me while Jason was talking about how not wanting to necessarily talk about it in the past, which he discussed in the article about him in the Jewish Journal. So and he talked about that, it took a lot of decision making for him to not just become a donor, but to even talk about it. And I was about to say, that's funny. The two donors on this have very similar personalities, because Laurel Schramm is one of the main words people would use to describe both Jason and Laurel, honestly, is humble. Like, you would call both of them very humble servants to their community. I mean, I'm not saying that in a weird way, like they really are. And I was going to say, wow, what a coincidence that the two people happen to be. And then I said, you know what? That's not a coincidence, because the types of people that sign up to do this, you're cut from a different cloth. You have to be a certain type of person to think to yourself with no pressure, as Jason says, there never should be pressure, with no manipulations, with just saying, this is something I feel like I should do. I'm starting to feel weird and incomplete and even guilty if I'm not doing it. So I'm going to do that. That's not your typical person, because most of us, myself included, have at least some level of ego and narcissism. And we're thinking, me first. That's how we function. That's how we survive in life. Me first. And after that, family first, right? The first person that any of us would think about first. So it's very smart, first of all, that they give you the incentive to say, hey, not just you, but your family members, if you need it in the future, are going to need it. Even though it's funny that Laurel's thinking that's not all my family members, as if everybody will suddenly have a contagion of all needing kidneys. But it's actually, it makes me want to tell people, reshape your minds if you're watching this, because I'm going to let you be selfish and realize something that I just realized during this that I'd never thought of before. It doesn't have to be a selfless act of kindness to do this. You want to know something? What if one of your family members one day needs one of these organs? You're going to be whoever, wherever you are on the list, and you're going to be like Bonnie, and you're going to be told that you're a 2 in 1,000 chance of being given as a match. Well, let's just say that once upon a time, one of Bonnie's family members had donated a kidney. Guess what? Her chances wouldn't have been 2 in 1,000. Her chances would have been higher because she'd be told, oh, you're high on the list because your cousin Bob donated once. You can actually increase your family's chances if they have problems in the future by donating. So I'm not just trying to appeal to people's humanity and selflessness. I actually can appeal to people and say, this actually could be a good deal for your family. Go through the swab. It'll probably never happen, but if it ever happens, they're only going to take you on if it's safe. They're only going to take you on if they medically feel that there is really, really, like, you're going to be fine. You'll have the usual risks of anesthesia and post-op infection, but you know what? You're going to get elective surgeries in your life that are going to have those same risks too. So you know what? How about you do this too? And not only can you save a life, which should be a good enough reason, but isn't for so many, but you're also going to be almost like a secondary insurance policy for your entire family. How do you like that as a selling point? I'm just saying.
Boaz, I'd like to contribute a slightly different perspective.
Thank you.
As Bonnie's caregiver and husband, it isn't just a journey or a decision that she made or is going through. Everyone in your life is affected. Your family and your friends. You're all on the same journey and will experience the impact of your decision. You know, in our case, it was like Jason's wife, Lauren, his children, and his community, his mother, and others who, you know, were all impacted by the decision that he made. And, you know, we are, and our children and our family and our dear friends are all eternally grateful to all of them because of their involvement. You know, his selfless act, we can never forget because we all benefit by having Bonnie around for hopefully many, many more years.
It's not like they gave you an end result of how long this kidney is going to be good for you, right? This kidney should be, God willing, good for life, right?
That's the hope.
That's the hope. I mean, that's what all of us hope, right? Hopefully my kidney is good for life, and hopefully yours is too. Are you told, Bonnie, that your kidney has X percentage chance of success at this point? I mean, it's not in the early weeks. I'm sure, like anything, I'm sure, like after cancer treatments or anything else, I'm sure they tell you like the first few hours are key, the first few days, the first few weeks. I'm sure it's something like that, I imagine. I assume you're at the point where your body is considered having accepted it, right?
Yes, they didn't say anything. If I ask my nephrologist, he'll say, what am I, a fortune teller? Like, do I know exactly what's going to happen? But I did ask him, like, what are the chances of it failing in the first 3 months, in the first 6 months? And he said, it tends to happen much later. And I've had my kidney for 1.5 years already. I've had Jason's kidney for 1.5 years, and it seems to be working very, very well.
Well,
They don't tell you.
He has like 4 graduate degrees, so if his wasn't working well, nobody's would.
For one thing, Boaz, it's important to remember about kidney is that live donor kidneys work better than deceased donor kidneys. So the rejection rates and the long-term function of a live donor kidney or a kidney from a live donor is better than if it's from a deceased donor. So they're not equivalent. In the liver world, they're essentially equivalent. A live donor liver segment or portion functions equally as and the survival rates are essentially equivalent between live donor liver and deceased donor liver. But for kidney, live donor kidneys are better. They function better. Their rejection rates are lower. They're phenomenal. So you're actually giving a better kidney than they could get in the regular world and through the regular process. I'm not sure that that's an incentive, but it's important to think about. You're giving something that they can't really get on the on the waiting list. It's better than what they can get on the waiting list.
Is the pancreas something that people can donate live or no?
No, it used to be, not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. It's too risky of an operation. Not really.
Okay, the ones that we're focusing on here. Now, I know that I want to hear from you, Mike. Go ahead, please.
My apologies, but I've got a daughter to pick up, and I have to. This is a terrific conversation. I didn't realize it was going to be as long. So my apologies. With all due respect, I'm going to have to go pick someone up. But I've enjoyed meeting and talking with all of you guys, and God bless you. Keep up the great work. I think what you're talking about is the halo effect of what you guys are doing. Lauren, Rabbi, that it continues to go out for the family. I think it's a wonderful. Thank you, Boaz, for putting this together. And my apologies for having to run off, but
no. We've already gone over. I'm gonna try to wrap us up soon for everybody's sake. But thank you, Gabler, for giving us your time. You've given of your money from your winnings and survivor to all those worthy veterans, and now you've given us your time. We didn't even get a chance to talk to you about your cool job in the hospitals where you work with heart valves.
Another time, for sure.
Another time. Great to see you.
Thank you all. Take good care.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Yeah, thank you. And now, Jason, I'm pretty sure you do have to go, and probably should have already. I've been texting you privately on the side saying that you can go if you need to, and I don't think you've seen it. But let me ask you. Really, so many people wanted to know this from at least the Jewish community, and they're probably going to want to know this from outside of the Jewish community, but you won't be able to authorize to ask that. From at least a Jewish perspective, I'm sure you get this question a lot. Give us the sort of easy to digest understanding view of what are the religious implications of donating as a live donor and to be a donor like Gabler is on his card. The only thing I know about it is that there are organizations like Halachic Organ Donor Society, HODOS, which I have in my card, where you can select the box and say, I want to donate the organs that are in line with these rabbinical thinking and things like that. I'd really like to hear more about it, and because that's going to be a lot of people who watch this going through the Jewish Journal and so on. So what are the halachic, the Jewish law implications of organ donation?
Well, living organ donation, there's really no halachic, Jewish legal concerns. It's highly encouraged and a great mitzvah. It's not required, but it's considered to be a great thing as long as one is, healthy and safe to be able to do it. Which of course they wouldn't allow them to do it if they weren't. Dead donors, there are a lot of misconceptions about it in the Jewish community. There's a lot of people that think somehow the body won't be resurrected or the body has to be buried whole. But the reality is that when something's done in order to save a life, first of all, we don't consider the body parts that are being transplanted to require burial because they're essentially being kept alive in the new person. Also, we override almost anything in Judaism to save a life. So whether it's concerns about speedy burial or any kind of damage to the body, it's worth it in order to save someone's life. The major concerns, the major debates that come up in the Jewish community, as Dr. Nissen was referencing before, are related to the definition of death. There are some rabbis that don't recognize brain death as being the definition of death. That obviously makes it much more complicated, even though many rabbis do accept that. So it depends on how you define death. That's why the HODS organization, which is now AMATI, a really wonderful organization that's doing great work, and they have a lot of education on that. So that's where they help people to understand when it's allowed, when it's encouraged. But in general, it's considered to be a great mitzvah in Judaism. It's just not something that we would force someone to do, but it's something that's extremely praiseworthy if someone's able to do so.
So for somebody who's curious to read more about this, Amatai is EMATAI, amatai.org. What does Amatai mean or stand for, or do you not know? So people.
Yeah, if not now, when? If not now, when. They encourage people to have conversations about these types of issues, so that before they're in that moment in the hospital where they have to make a horrible decision, during a very stressful situation, this organization tries to help people have these conversations ahead of time and think through these really important issues, whether it's creating an advance directive or just having education on these issues.
Is it, if somebody was a religious Jewish person watching this, should they not necessarily just go and just say, okay, checking the box on my driver's license that says organ donor, because there's too many potential things they should look into first? Or is that part like, well, that's when I'm dead, I'm dead?
If they're very concerned about religious issues, it makes sense to designate themselves as an organ donor in their advance directive primarily, because that way they can control how the process happens. So in an advance directive, for example, someone can designate that their rabbi be consulted or their family be consulted. If someone designates on their driver's license, they don't have to check with family. So it's still a wonderful opportunity to save life. But if they are concerned that they want their family to be involved with the decision, or their rabbi, because of various religious concerns that they might have, then the best way to do that is through their advance directive.
Somebody asked a question, but I was unfamiliar to this. But do you happen to know, somebody mentioned that, what do you think about the idea of deregulation of kidney transplants or liver donations where it doesn't cost you money to donate? But we've talked about this, and it seems like it doesn't cost anybody money, but does it actually cost money and it's just being subsidized? Do you have any idea about this? Because I was very unfamiliar, but a few people asked me. Nobody on this chat really has a clue about
I mean, the much bigger question is whether you can compensate people for it. I mean, that's the debate. Can you compensate? And you cannot. It's illegal to take in
America.
In America.
Yeah.
That's right. In America, it's illegal. It is an interesting debate because I think there's data from around the world that if you do that, you can eliminate organ shortage very quickly. But you can't do that in America. It's absolutely illegal. So compensation is not allowed.
Do most people in the fields, is there a consensus in your field, Dr. Nissen, because it is your field? Is there any sort of consensus about how people feel? Is that one of those things where like all the doctors and transplant, like, why not compensate? We already pay for surrogates, we pay for sperm donors, no?
Not really. It's not a hot topic of debate. I mean, again, we're trying to find get organs to work that otherwise would be discarded, and that's going to make a huge dent. It really is. And we talked on this conference, we talked about other ways to grow organs. That's a long way off, but the big hope right now is that we can recondition damaged organs and get them to work through a variety of new scientific processes. And that's really the immediate next decade, I think. I did want to say one thing, because it's been hit on a bunch of times, that talking to your family and your loved ones is the most important thing. It's far more important than checking the box. Obviously, we should all check our box and be donors, but it's so great what you're doing here. And Scott, when you get out there, and Laura, when you get out there and you talk to people, and Jason, let them know what's going on, and Bonnie, everyone, the more you tell people about your story, the more they say, wow, you had a kidney, you were a donor. It demystifies it, and it makes it real. And hopefully they then take that story home, and at their dinner table, they say to their family, you know what, who got a kidney from so-and-so? If I ever need that, you guys, you take them, you take everything. I want to be a donor. That conversation around the dinner table or whatever on the couch is so important. Talking to your loved ones and telling them your thoughts. And this kind of an event and talking to the people around you, the circle just grows and grows and grows of people affected by this. That's the way to really turn this around, to get rid of the public stigma and the confusion and all these things, is public awareness, knowledge, and relationships. Telling people who you are, who affected your life, and how important it was. And then they're like, Scott, he got a heart. He wasn't supposed to get a heart that quick. He got a heart quick. That's incredible. And these stories are so important.
To speak of compensation, let me just say that I did take off 2 weeks of work. I took off less than I thought, because they actually moved like 3 days before the surgery date up one day. So I thought I was going to have a day off to like catch up on notes and then go. But no, I worked into the night went to the hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was so fast. Anyway, and then I was back at work in 2 weeks. They said it could take 2 to 8 weeks. I felt fine in 2 weeks. I went back. So, but compensation, they did give me a squeezy liver.
We're gonna shut that
I got a
hospital down.
squeezy. I got a squeezy kidney.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love my squeezy liver.
And Scott has a squeezy heart.
Squeezy
Yeah,
heart?
it's easy hard. It's squeezed.
There you go.
My old one wasn't squeezed.
Oh
And,
my
after
God.
my husband said, "Is that what a liver looks like?" I was like, "Oh my goodness." You didn't even know. Anyway.
I mean, I will piggyback before as I try to sort of end this for everybody's sake, because a lot of you are in the East Coast especially. To piggyback on what Dr. Nick just said, I really need we need the humble, wonderful, beautiful souls that are people like Jason and Laurel to get out of, like you are doing, get out of your comfort zone of being modest and people that don't talk about yourselves, because I know you both and you don't. You talk about other people for their sakes, and for their sakes, ironically, talk about yourself, because the demystification, as Nick said, is exactly what's needed. And that's why I'm doing this. You all know that I don't get paid for this. I'm certainly not getting notoriety for this. I get more hell than anything else from the internet when I do anything. So it's really fantastic that we're doing this. I so strongly encourage anybody who's watching this, which will happen in 3 or 4 weeks from now, and then live in perpetuity on the interwebs. I strongly encourage anybody who's watching this, more than I've ever encouraged any other thing about any other cause, because this is literally life-saving, to watch this video. At the very least, I'm not saying you have to immediately sign up, because the first thing you should do is talk to your families. But at the very least, share this video. Talk about it. Make sure this gets seen everywhere so other people can go through the same decision making you're starting to go through. And then step 2, talk to your family and say, is there any reason we shouldn't just sign up for these free kits and just get swabbed? Probably the answer is, why not? Because you can still make a decision later about what you do if you ever get called. If you never get called, you're going to at least know that you put it out there. And then step 3 is making those decisions, getting into your trust, making all the other decisions that have how they can impact you. I don't see much of a downside, though, in sharing, in making sure this conversation gets seen, and honestly, in getting swabbed. In fact, I'm actually inspired by this, even though I was rejected years ago because of my condition. It's been 25 years since that happened. I know that things have changed from the FDA. Maybe I'm a match now again, and I don't even know it. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I'm still in their database. And otherwise, I'll just get a new kit, because why not? It doesn't even cost me a postage stamp. So this has been awesome. You are all awesome. I want to just put it out there and ask if there's any last words any one of you want to say to people watching, to each other, before we say goodbye. And otherwise, we will sayonara.
Well, I would say that I'm more than happy to talk to anyone. If I can be helpful to anyone, please feel free to reach out. And Scott, I found you a squishy heart.
I appreciate that. I like this one better, but I'm partial.
I have my 20-year-old daughter has a chromosomal disorder. She's developmentally delayed. And my family was, even though I was very much, you've seen my take on how I would wanted to be a donor. My family was very scared, very worried. And like 2 nights before my surgery, she came downstairs and found me, and she said, Ima, I'm scared, about your surgery. And so I pulled up from the internet a video from one of the liver transplant centers. I think it was one from Canada. Was a video showing, interviewing people that were donors and recipients and often family members. And it was, beautiful, the gift of life that you gave to someone. And so it was just like a short 7-minute video, and she watched it. And I said, this is why I'm doing it. And it ended, and she turned to me and she said, okay, I'll do it. So that's the message that she got, which is shows her beautiful heart as well.
That is wonderful. And by the way, my friend David Kopp sends me a message and just about this, and I say, oh, why are you asking that question? And he said, well, I donated a kidney to my sister. And I said, you did? Again, the people that do this don't talk about themselves enough. This is a guy I've known for years. And he says, yeah, one of my sisters, polycystic kidney disease. Gave it to her when her kidneys failed. It's been a shockingly easy road, 0 lifestyle change, 10 out of 10 would recommend. That was his text to me.
Wow.
10 out of 10 would recommend
Wow.
0 lifestyle change. That is somebody who hadn't even brought it up to me. An eligible bachelor in the LA community, by the way. So let me just say 10 out of 10 would recommend. I think 10 out of 10 would recommend for all of you guys. The living donations by Laurel and from Jason, and the unfortunate but fortunate post-mortem donation that has saved and extended Scot Pollard's life, who has given him a chance to spend time with his family, much deservedly, after spending years taking care of his wife's breast cancer, which thank God she beat. So this is what we all need to focus on, how easy these things can be. We can make the world a better place. Dare I say, Democrats can donate to Republicans and Republicans can donate to Democrats, and they're probably going to be okay. Thank you, every one of you. I wish you a wonderful and peaceful and safe and healthy good night.
Boaz, thank you so much for doing this.
Pleasure.
Hope it has the effect you want.
Absolutely, and to you all. Good night. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Chosen Links. If you like what you heard, feel free to share this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our socials at Boaz Hepner on X and Facebook and at Hepner.Boaz on Instagram.